Council will call this meeting to order. For the record, it is almost 4:30 by one clock, but it's 4:32 by another. So we're going to go with 4:30 right now. Call this the City Council work session to order. Start off with roll call attendance.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Councilman Cavanagh.
Here.
Councilwoman Little Roberts.
Here.
Councilman Taylor.
Here.
Councilman Overton.
Here.
Councilman Whitlock.
Councilman Whitlock, are you able to hear us? Yes. So we will be without Councilman Whitlock, but we will reach out to him and try to get him re-engaged for purposes of our quorum.
And Mayor Simonson.
Here. Next up is adoption of the agenda.
Mayor,
Councilman Cavanagh.
we adopt the agenda as presented. Second.
I have a motion second to adopt the agenda. Is there any discussion? If not, all in favor, signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed,
Aye.
nay. Oh, there he is. Okay, so Councilman Whitlock is with us. We all ayes and the agenda is agreed to. Next up is consent agenda.
Mayor,
Councilman Cavanagh.
we approve the consent agenda for the mayor to sign and the clerk to attest. Second.
I have a motion second to approve the consent agenda. Is there any discussion? If not, all in favor, signify by saying aye.
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 Opposed, nay. The ayes have it, and the consent agenda is agreed to. There were no items moved from the consent agenda, so we'll move on to item 12, department reports. And the first item up is destination downtown discussion. So as looks like, Chris, are you coming up? Is that so? But I'm going to first send this over to Councilman Taylor just for a quick introduction on this conversation.
Thank you, Mayor, colleagues, and MDC board commissioners who are here as well. Just want to take a moment and kind of recap sort of where we're at and what the next steps are with the destination downtown plan. First off, I want to thank Ashley for working with us in a way to try to work towards the goal, and appreciate your memo. I think the memo she put together is pretty clear about sort of what our goal is that we're striving for. As stated, this is updating the our urban renewal agency's destination downtown plan with working towards the goal of, is this something that the city can also adopt? Not just our urban renewal agency, but something that the city can put our arms around. This is a draft document that has been out for a number of months. There's been a lot of work, a lot of resources put into it. There's a lot to digest. So what we've decided to do is to divide up this plan in a number of topics, and we'll tackle it in a work session once a month for the next 5-6 months as we dive into it. This gives council an opportunity to have a more of a digestible format to get our arms around that. To be clear, I think sort of we understand expectations. What we're providing here is feedback, not necessarily our recommendations, but this is feedback for MDC, because this is an MDC document. So the goal being to provide feedback that MDC can then take and modify the plan how they choose. And we will see whatever the final product is when we get done. But I think the expectation for us tonight is to provide our feedback. We are an important constituency for MDC in this. And so not to take ownership of it, but to provide the feedback. And then when we get to the end of the process, we'll see where we are and how that's viewed. So there are some commissioners, I think it'd be appropriate for any of them if we have some questions, if they want to chime in on the process as well. But with that, I think we can kind of just dive into it. And it's, again, I think we envisioned an open back and forth dialogue with providing some constructive feedback. So thank you, Mayor.
Thank you, Councilman Taylor.
Okay, hopefully you can hear me well. Thank you, Mr. Mayor and council. Appreciate all the leadership getting us back here. It's been a minute, but we're excited to certainly start this process off and have a discussion today about parking, and then moving forward, as mentioned by Councilman Taylor, other subjects as we go. As a reminder, my name is Chris Danley. I am the project manager for and on behalf of MDC with respect to Destination Downtown. And I have been local here for a long time. And certainly have appreciated this project. It was a lot of fun, a lot of interesting things and moving parts. Online, I believe it should be Owen. He'll let him introduce himself. Owen is with Rick Williams and Associates. Him and his team really headed up the parking effort, and he's going to be instrumental in answering a lot of the questions that you all have. So I'll give him a moment. Owen, hopefully you're on with us and have a chance to introduce yourself.
Yes, hello. Owen Ron Kelly here with Rick Williams Consulting, and we were very pleased to be a part of this project. It was a lot of fun, and we worked with a great committee too. And I think we got a lot of really good input from the downtown stakeholders, and hopefully that is well captured in kind of the recommendations and strategies that we outlined in this report. So again, as Chris said, I'm here to answer questions that you guys might have, but sit in the background and let him run the show in the meantime. So thanks very much for having me be here today.
Thank you, Owen. So my intent today is just to keep this presentation very quick and high level. It's really about you and this conversation, but I want to make sure to honor the process and give you some of that background information that I think would be important and relevant before we get into any questions. So what is our purpose here today? I think as mentioned, it's really to get your reaction and to answer any questions that you might have, and also to get some suggestions with respect to the content, and also set us up for next steps. And I think just give us some directions on the next meeting that will be in front of you in about 5 or 6 weeks. So real quick, so big picture, before we totally dive into the parking, just as a reminder, in terms of all the outreach and the ways in which information was gleaned and collected. We had a number of different methods to do that for all of the subjects, including parking. So we had multiple stakeholder meetings with lots of stakeholders, whether it was council members, different commissioners from different, like your planning and zoning commission, business owners, employers, on and on and on, in order to get good information at the outset. We participated in community events, Dairy Days and Oktoberfest being both of those. We had an opportunity to engage the public that way, and parking was certainly a subject that was on the forefront of a lot of people's minds, and we had questions regarding parking at both events. We had online questionnaires and surveys, some of which were broader with respect to all of the ambitions of Destination Downtown, while others were, again, more specific to parking. But really, again, because this was such a major task in and of itself, it really began with Owen and Rick Williams' team and the creation of some subgroups. So I'll go over a little bit about what that looked like, and then give Owen an opportunity to add anything at the end of this slide should he want to. The creation of the subgroups was really paramount to moving forward over, I believe it was, I want to say, about a 7 or 8 month process specific to parking. So that subgroup, again, compiled numerous parties, folks that were on the MDC board, folks that were on the council at the time, and many others who know downtown parking. And they got together multiple times throughout the duration. I think it was 4 different times. Rick Williams and his team and their team created 6 different working papers. Attached to your work session documentation was the final work session or work paper, in addition to the content that was in the actual Destination Downtown plan. So you got 2 documents. The final work paper was really kind of the kit and caboodle, but if you want to see more about parking, we have more for you. But that was that lead in as the process unfolded, and really was topical in nature. Their team also did a code audit and parking operations overview. So they got a sense of what are your policies? How do you handle parking? Interviewing staff, right? Interviewing folks who understand with the police department and others how that enforcement arm looks. And so that was a very big piece of it. Then came the utilization audit and the actual survey. So they came to town, spent several days, and just canvassed the entire geography, and really got a good sense of not only where all the parking is available, who owns it, and how is it being used, and when is it being used. So that was very important. And then, of course, the survey was also key, which was to understand people's general sentiment around parking, where they thought it might be available, where they thought it might not be available, and on and on and on. So all of that information really went into what you saw in your final work session document, which was the plan/recommendations. Owen, was there anything that I missed on that?
No, I think that was a great summary. I think, and just so putting in perspective, those working papers, those white papers that we did a parking 101, we did a policy and code, we did the operations, just general operations piece, and then understanding the current parking environment, which was essentially the data collection effort and the summary results. And then we talked a little bit about the parking experience, what it's like for the user, as you had stated. And then the last piece was about emerging technologies. And as Chris well stated, all of these were kind of wrapped together to create the final parking master plan, which is essentially what is in front of you now. So there was a lot of work that went into it, and again, input from the stakeholders as we went along. But yeah, really kind of a thorough approach to how we kind of tackled parking for Meridian.
Thanks, Owen. And I would just say, should you want any of those white papers, we'll certainly be happy to pass them on. A lot of great work went into them, but it's definitely a lot. So be prepared for a lot of parking discussions. But again, happy to pass those on should you wish. In addition to all the information gathering, the subgroup was then used to create the parking goals. Pretty straightforward. I don't think I need to read off too many of them. Just a couple worth highlighting, though. The notion of being convenient, right? That's one of those things where if you know sort of urban transportation, you know that in a downtown environment, a sizable percentage at any given time is just circling, looking for parking. So if it's available, it's known, it's signed, it's clear, and so forth, then that really is one of those ways to help mitigate some of that, in this case, the traffic issues. Safe, another one, viable, and so forth. So again, I'm not going to belabor the point, but at the outset, there were goals established as to how this final plan looked and what it needed to address. So, reminder, here's the geography, the visual geography to the right. Almost 4,000 available parking stalls in the study area specific for the parking element. As a quick reminder, our task overall was a geography much larger than the downtown traditional city core, but this parking element was much more focused on the historic downtown, if you will. How those 4,000 or so stalls are broken up, you can see bulleted on the slides in front of you, but a lot of different ones, including yourself, encompass in the government realm with about 300. Weekday and weekend use varied from about 33% up to about half during weekday, and then weekend about 18 up to almost about a third. So that might come as a surprise to you. That usually does. People often hear there's just no parking, or there's that perception that there's no parking. Often what they mean is there's no parking directly in front of my bumper, right? As opposed to it might be a block over, or it might not be as obvious. That does not mean that there aren't particular parts of downtown that are busier with respect to parking. There certainly are. You know them. I'm sure, see them and hear about them all the time. But there are a lot of other places that are not parked or used as often or turn over as often. So the one more thing I wanted to add, and I think this would be an appropriate place for Owen to add, is this notion of this 85th or 85% goal of parking. It's something I learned in the process. Owen, can you share a little bit about what that is and why that's a general, sort of bar for a city to try and reach?
Sure. Yeah, I think the 85% rule is kind of an adopted industry standard that says, when your parking supply becomes 85% or or greater occupied, that's when it has a negative impact on the user experience. They're coming to the parking supply and they're looking for space and they can't find it, so they end up circling a block. It creates added congestion, creates frustration on their part, and kind of taints the initial experience within that parking area. And let's call it a downtown in this case, but so the idea is that when things reach that kind of constrained level, we want to look at different kind of strategies that we can use to either mitigate some of that demand or spread some of that demand to areas where there's surplus parking. And so it's a little hard to see, but on the maps that are on the slide in front of you, we use color to demonstrate the levels of occupancy. And so those red, we've highlighted both block faces and the lots. Shown in red are those that are 85% or more occupied. Then it grades downward, and so that orange is kind of the sweet spot. We kind of want to see parking supplies between 70 and 80%, 84%, because it shows that there's robust level of activity, but at the same time, parking is still easily found by the user. But also, it really does support good retail use, and it's also sought after by retailers or just ground floor active uses that want to locate in those locations. You've heard about folks that stand out on a corner and will do pedestrian counts in a downtown to know whether or not a business should locate in a particular area. Well, the same thing goes for a parking supply. If it's between 70 and 84%, that's what people really want to see, because they know there's available parking, but they also know that something really good is happening in that area to draw as many people that it is. So that 85% level, as Chris alluded to, is kind of the point at which action should be taken, or at least be considered, in terms of implementing some sort of strategy to alleviate that congestion. And typically we try to use the existing supply. We don't advocate for additional parking unless it's kind of a last result, because building parking is expensive, and we'd rather have active uses in our downtown rather than vehicle storage.
Great. Thank you, Owen.
Yep.
I don't know about you, but I can't think of too many more riveting things than to sit and stand at a parking stall to see if it's occupied. But I'm very glad that Owen and his team volunteered and got paid to do that. Well, thank you, Owen. I want to point out, though, one of the things that you note here, you might see, is that if the objective is even at 70% on the low end, so the peak, during the peak at 52%, you still have 20 roughly percent of available parking as a buffer between where it is today versus where we need or we want it to be, even at the bottom end of it being optimally used. So that's great. So I'm kind of giving you a bit of a prelude to what the findings were. And I think overall, the findings, I think, were pretty darn positive. That is that while, yes, as mentioned, and as again, Owen and his team saw, there are hotspots, but overall, there's lots of available parking. There is not, I repeat, there is not a need for some of the radical actions that maybe have been in the news in the last 6 months with respect to parking in downtowns. You probably have seen some of that. But you don't have to do that. There's other strategies and things that can be employed in the meantime for actually the foreseeable future to maintain the parking that we have, but to optimize it as much as possible. And this chart on the right, this table, is, I think, really well done by the team in all of the different recommendations. And this is just a summary. The document that you saw, that final working paper, goes into each of these recommendations with much more detail and describes exactly what it is, the general timelines, the general cost assumptions, and so forth. And Owen and his team's recommendation with respect to the timing of when that ought to be pursued, right? In terms of trying to optimize the parking that you have available. So all of that stuff is included. No garage, no parking garage, no metering. A few other little elements that may be worth considering, EV parking, bike parking, and other things. But this table and really, again, that document that you saw is the heart of the results of all that hard work over several months, all the subholder or subgroup work, all the survey and analysis that went into it, and really what came out of it. So this gets me to the point here, which is these are recommendations made by certainly parking professionals and experts that know this inside and out. That does not mean, though, that it isn't subject to possible tweaks and adjustments, how you see fit and how maybe it fits really well with what you know, of course, about the city of Meridian regarding budgets, staffing, prioritization, and on and on and on. So that's really what, we're here to be able to discuss, questions that we can answer, and ultimately, if there's any adjustments that need to be made, make them and move forward and implement. So with that, I would stand for any questions or comments and probably pass many of them on to Owen.
Mr.
Thank
Mayor.
you. Councilman Taylor.
Chris, thank you. One of my questions, I was kind of curious. I'm intrigued by the idea of getting employees to park in places that don't intrude on the residential parking preferences for customers and things like that. When it came to who was occupying which space, did you have any sense of like, were a lot of the parking spaces, especially in sort of the red highlighted areas, were there a lot of employees parking in those spots? Did you have any sense of like who was actually using it?
I'll certainly let Owen answer this question, but real quickly, I just knowing the downtown environments of Meridian and every other downtown in the valley here, certainly the distance matters, right? In that proximity from door to door. I as a anecdotally former personal trainer would watch my clients who were going to work out for an hour with me try to find the closest parking stall to the front door, and I just never understood that, right? You're here to burn a calorie, but that's human nature, right? And so the rule of thumb often is as close as we can get is typically, our default. But I'll certainly, Owen, what do you have to add to that?
Yeah, I mean that's part of the reason why we do a turnover study, and where we are actually looking at a vehicle's license plate to know how long it's actually parked there. And so that is one thing that we, based on how we don't know this for certain because we don't sit and wait by a vehicle to see who's coming and going per se, but based typically on the parking behavior and how long they've parked there, we can make some assumptions as to whether or not that might be an employee or not. One thing that I've found there is the average time stay of a user in some of those non-time limited stalls is like 3.5 hours. And again, this is an average, so that means that some folks are staying there quite a bit longer, whereas some are turning over. And so typically those tend to be the employees. And so we thought that the best way of managing, we have identified certain areas on street where it might be okay for employees to park. Ideally, we'd want them parking around the outskirts of downtown, away from where ground level active uses are. And so using timed parking, we thought was a good way of doing that. We don't want to force people to stay any what am I trying to say? We didn't want to force people out of a parking stall that want to stay there longer. We want to make sure that they too have also good parking options available to them. But we want that downtown kind of core central area to be regularly turning over, so our business owners can have as much business as possible and our customers have the most convenient parking stalls available to them.
Mr. Mayor, quick follow-up.
Councilman Taylor.
Kind of curious about timed parking and enforcement. And I'm kind of curious from your perspective as experts in this field, which I am not. Is there a way where you can put up signage about these are timed spots without the penalty of enforcement, and that behavior starts to change because they say, oh, this is 30 minutes or this is 60-minute parking only, and I'm going to self-regulate? Or is it your guys' experience that you have to have some kind of enforcement penalty for people to actually change behavior when it comes to parking?
That's
So
an excellent.
Great question. Go ahead, Owen. I was
Yeah,
just going to immediately go to you.
Yeah, I was just gonna say that's an excellent question, and I have a caveated answer for you. I would say that it it can work well for visitors, especially infrequent visitors to a downtown. So if a downtown community is kind of touristed based, a lot of that signage will work pretty well. You can put up time signs and saying you can park here for 3 hours, and those visitors will mostly adhere to that. However, if it's a regular user who comes downtown often, or it's an employee, they will learn that there are no repercussions for staying for 4 hours or 5 hours in that 3 hour stall, or they know that they're not going to get a citation. That behavior kind of deteriorates quickly, and then you'll see that over time, it won't take long for most folks to just ignore those posted time saves without some sort of periodic enforcement. And that's why one of the strategies that we recommended here was not regular or active enforcement, but something that is periodic or infrequent, where folks will go through and making sure that people are complying with those posted time limits.
And I guess as a follow-up real quick, I see a question here is just, when you look at the recommendations and knowing what I've known from this project, it seems, and Owen, if you have anything to add on this, by all means, but there are some, I would argue, sort of like specific pillars, if you will, or topics that many of these fall under. And a couple of them get directly to your point, Councilman Taylor, and that is consistency and time and signage, and making sure that it's very clear, right? And that everybody, everywhere in our downtown environment is known to have a certain, hey, 2 hours, this is all 2 hours. There's no ambiguity there, right? There is an occasional, if it comes to it, we got to enforce it somehow, whether it's warning, whether it's the next step, whatever the case may be. But it really, if you could summarize, a lot of it has a lot to do with consistency, of just making sure the entire system is very consistent in all of what that can mean.
Councilman Overton.
So just a little background before I start. So I was asking Ashley tonight, I think it was about 15 years ago when I first sat on the first parking subcommittee. And I was wearing a different hat back then, and the city looked a lot different than it does today. And we were trying to determine what we were going to do with downtown parking at that time. And it wasn't a matter of not having enough. It was who was parking there. In fact, one of the biggest feuds we had 10 to 15 years ago was two business owners on Idaho Street that got into battles because they each wanted to park in front of each other's business, to the point it got personal. And we got called many times for that. Now, we got through that. Everybody matured or left. Left is a better description. But what we've had to deal with as the city's grown is we've dealt with a cultural shift from small town Meridian to bigger town Meridian. And before I ask questions or go into anything else, I'll tell you, just a month ago, my wife and I came downtown for dinner. And I drove around the block, and then I drove around another block, and she asked me, "You're smiling. Why are you smiling?" I said, "Because it's full." See, I look at that as downtown's doing much better, and we're starting to see it fill up in the evenings. This was dinner time, and it was doing really well. And the parking spaces available to me were all within a block, but you had to walk a half block to a block. And we have a city that's not used to that. When you used to go to the old barber shop on Idaho Street, you could park within sight of it. So a lot of what we're dealing with is training our own residents and people that come here that the city's changing, and parking a block away or a block and a half away is okay. That's still not bad. When I was on the parking subcommittee as this process started, I always get a little nervous when people come from bigger cities and talk about what parking should be. And I was probably defensive when it first started, and I'll own up to that right now. Because when you're coming out of Portland, Oregon, or some other cities, and you start talking about Meridian, yeah, I'm going to get my hackles up right away. Because this is Meridian. And I knew from the onset when we looked at this that we had enough parking. And I told Ashley, I said, I think the assumption was that we didn't. And when it was all done and said, we found out we still do have enough parking downtown for now. But even I acknowledge that there's too many projects, whether it's the Civic Block, whether it's Union 93, there are still too many projects up in the air that we don't know where downtown parking is going to be. And we don't know what those future answers are going to look like. But we know what we've got today. We know what we had 5 years ago. I think we know through an experiment that we don't have to do as a city. We don't have to try to look at employing paid parking downtown, because we've been able to watch firsthand what's happened in a neighboring city and how that thought kind of turned into a disaster. We see cities that do it successfully. I don't see it working here. I just don't see it working in our downtown. Not now, not in the next 10 years. When policy was talked about, when this subcommittee first started off, there were a lot of suggestions about the policies and how we should rewrite a lot of our city code to reflect those policies in the code. And of course, I'm a big believer, and city attorney sitting right here, that code should be code. And if we needed to write a policy for how we wanted our downtown parking to be, that should be a separate document outside of our code. I just think those need to be separate. It's enough of a process trying to change codes when that happens, that should be a separate document talking about what you want to see downtown parking to be. We have struggled over those past, 30 years, 35 years. I forget how long I've been around working with the city. So let's say 35 years ago, we had 2-hour parking signs in downtown. But unless you had a very bored police officer, nobody was enforcing those. And generally speaking, we didn't unless we were told to. That's just the way it was. Unless there was a problem, it wasn't happening. It was mostly just Idaho Street. We have more 2-hour parking within our downtown. We don't put it on the backs of our police officers today. We have code enforcement, we have community service officers, we have other personnel, but we still to this day don't have dedicated parking enforcement personnel. And we're still, I believe, walking around with chalk and coming back after that 2-hour time frame. So at best right now, you could have a 2-hour parking to almost a 4-hour parking before we're going to take any direct enforcement. And as a city, we've got to talk about sometime in the future, when do we want to look at how we upgrade that? Because that's probably our first, is we can't talk about how we want to add additional parking to our downtown if we want to add more signage, if we don't also talk about, if we don't have the folks to enforce it the right way. It doesn't matter how many signs we put out. We're not enforcing it. It doesn't take very long before they figure out that we're not following up behind them. And although, Doug, I truly wish we could put signs up that would just convince people not to park there for longer than 2 hours, I just don't see that happening. Because they'll park for 4 to 5 hours now in the 2-hour spots. I think what you guys are doing is great. I think there's so much that we don't know right now about the future, about some of our biggest projects that were going to give us additional parking, that it's a tough time to really say what's the next step forward. When you showed the maps about red and green, I couldn't help but notice that 2 of the red ones were the United States Post Office, which we'll all agree with because we've been trying to get them for years to give us an additional post office in our city so we don't just have one, and the Cole Christian School, which of course, when you consider a school was built literally to be a very small elementary school. It was never designed to have parking to handle all those kids. So obviously, we've got certain areas that transform and change and are not going to have enough parking. But I think when we look at our downtown right now for the next few years, I think we're going to continue to have adequate parking. It's going to fill up. We're going to have people that are going to be used to walking. But trust me, there's a lot of people around here that could use a couple of blocks of a good walk before dinner or after dinner. I don't think that's a bad thing. So I appreciate everything you've been doing. I will admit right up front, I was a little bit hesitant when you came in from presenting ideas from a bigger city. But I look at the document today and read through it. And mind you, don't give me a 182-page document. That just kills me. Something that's much, much shorter is always appreciated, that we can get right to the point of what we need to do, what we need to look at, what we need to carry forward. And the fact that in 6 months, we may be wanting to review downtown parking based on where we're at with these projects that are unknowns today. So that's all for me for now.
If I can, Mr. Mayor and Councilman Overton, a great point. Obviously, institutional knowledge goes a long way back, and I think a lot of validity what you said. That's partly a big reason why I like the way that this document in the parking realm particularly was written, because it's almost like a menu, really is. It's sort of pick what you want, order what you want. Ideally, I think that Owen and his team would say eventually probably the whole thing. But to your point, there's a lot of unknowns and uncertainties there that remain, but that there are some preliminary steps now that can be taken that don't interfere with current operations or don't necessarily have to get into the enforcement realm just yet, as mentioned, but do make sure that things are standardized and things are obvious and fulfill the very goals that you and everybody else who was on that subcommittee came up with. So certainly those timelines could change. I'm sitting here as you were talking, I'm thinking about how to draw comparison. My very first meeting that I ever had 20 years ago when I was at ACHD was at the J-Bill Circuit Building. Not for anything to do with J-Bill, because J-Bill was long gone. It was for the 10-mile interchange charrette build that was happening over the course of a week. And I was told that that building had more power to it than any building basically in the state of Idaho, because of what was thought to be needed at the time, but has since obviously changed. And to your point, yes, not everything is static. So excellent points. I certainly think that there's room to make some strides, but maybe not, again, all of it up front or even in the next couple of years.
Mr. Mayor,
Councilman Taylor.
curious if you could speak a little bit, Chris, about some successful strategies that you may have learned from other places about getting employees or employers to get their employees to park in lots, maybe a block or two away, just so we can prioritize the customer. What kind of strategies have been proven effective other than saying pretty please?
I think that's as teed up for Owen as we're going to get. Owen, I'm sure you've got lots of stories that can be shared on that one.
Yeah, I mean, I think that there's several different things that can work. I think one of the things that is kind of as grassroots as you can get, and I think it works particularly well in smaller communities, is we call like a customer first policy. And it was first done a long time ago in Plano, Texas, and a lot of people have borrowed it ever since and applied it to their different communities. But the idea is that you're trying to demonstrate to the customer. So it's kind of a goodwill policy and program, but it's also holding each other accountable. And so it's business owners getting together and saying that, hey, we want to put our customers first. And so they do a little promotion campaign associated with it. You put stickers in your window or little placards up by your cash register to say, we're a business that chooses to put our customers first. And what that means is that we are asking our employees to park in particular locations off street or on the outskirts of downtown. because we care about our customers enough to where we want to make sure that they're getting the premier spaces, the ones that they are parking in front of just our businesses. And as part of those rules, employers can what do you call it? Self-enforce. And so you can see, well, I couldn't help but notice that Greg's parking in front of Liza's business. And, you can talk to them about it and say, hey, couldn't help but notice that you're there. We really want to ask you to make sure that and then we go and tell, you know, Greg that, one of his employees is parking in front of Liza's business. Can you have a conversation with them or something to that effect? And it's done in good faith. The idea is that the community is working together on this and that we want to have a great downtown for our customers and visitors to visit. And so, and then you can put up signs. You put signs in your window for your business, but you also can put signs on those lots and say that this is a customer first lot. And you can have designated employee parking spaces for folks there, or have that on street as well. And so that tends to be, it's kind of a warm fuzzy program all the way around. And it's usually done through a chamber or some sort of downtown boosters group that gets folks together rather than something that's heavily rule based and heavily enforced, that type of thing. Program doesn't really work that way, but it's been proven successful in many communities all over the country, really. I know that we brought this up with the stakeholder group, and we got some raised eyebrows and some curiosities with it. So, that could be a good possibility.
Councilman Cavanagh.
Chris, appreciate kind of walking us through this. This is our first reading this kind of elephant, one bite at a time each month. And so while I have a laundry list of questions, I want to be respectful of time. We're about halfway through the time that we have allotted. Help me understand what Administrator Ford's goal is kind of coming out of today. What are you looking for from the council? Because I think that will help me refrain what are some questions to maybe pose versus maybe taking offline versus your point about feedback. Is that about kind of the goals that have been kind of proposed about maybe where all of us feel as a council make the most sense and doesn't make sense? Help me understand I want to make sure this is a good use of your time. Yes, we're being informed and educated, but there is some action that we're hoping to take at one point after this. I want to make sure that we're helping to facilitate that.
Mr. Mayor, Councilman Kavner, I don't know if Ashley has anything to add. I'll just take a stab at that. And I think that the big question is how does this move forward? And MDC can only do so much, right? We know that clearly, specifically in arenas like parking, this is definitely going to be one that the city of Meridian needs to be a bigger stakeholder in than MDC in this particular piece. So what does it take to get comfortable for you to adopt the document somehow, some way? By resolution? Is it more formal, cited by your comprehensive plan? Are there action steps with respect to the code and so forth? And then of these recommendations, what do you feel comfortable moving forward with? And again, it's not necessarily you have to commit right here, right now, or even in the next, month or two or what have you, but it is a good discussion to prompt what is it going to take to try and optimize this parking for as long as we can before it becomes a problem, right? So that we can prevent this from being a bigger issue. So really the question is, and I'm not trying to deflect, but it is kind of that way, is what does it take for you all to feel comfortable taking that next step? Again, maybe it's just by resolution, however it ultimately needs to be for you to be comfortable. I think that's where we need to try to be. So if there's adjustments that need to be made, if there's tweaks that you feel are important, then I think that's important. I don't know, Ashley, you have anything to add? You're good? Okay.
Mr. Mayor.
Councilman Cavanagh.
Chris, does that mean that you want us kind of going through some of these strategy suggestions that are posed here on this slide? Is that where you want us to begin? Help me understand kind of what you see as kind of the starting point.
I don't think that we're going to have time to necessarily go through each one of these strategies. I don't recall the number, but I think there's a good 30 of them. I think the bigger question is, do you need us to go through these in order to take an action? Or is this a document that you can cite and then take that baton and run the next lap internally within the halls and walls of this building? And of course, with MDC and your business partners and property owners in downtown along for the ride.
So maybe, Mr. Mayor, just some then feedback then for discussion with council. Many of these strategies that are proposed, I'm in lockstep in agreement on. There's a handful that I'm lockstep very much not in agreement on. And there are others that I think that require, I think, some more vetting and flushing out. But I think it does speak at least to maybe where my kind of the overriding question is, because it's referenced a few times to this and our other speakers references as well, this customer first parking approach. Is that considered a nationwide best practice? Is that something that emerged from the stakeholder meeting? Is that something that emerged from the public engagement? And certainly we want to make it easy and accessible for customers to visit, but if I'm a downtown resident, I would say, well, wait, what about me? I should be your priority. So help me kind of understand how, because I think a lot of the recommendations are built on this kind of customer first approach.
Right. I'll have Owen answer this in a second, but I will add at least a couple of pieces before he does. I think that to your point, Commissioner Kavanagh, this is exactly why, for example, one of the recommendations is to explore the possibility of a residential permit. So for those neighborhood areas, preserving that asphalt that's right in front of their homes so that, you know, other folks aren't clogging that up, and we know what kind of contentiousness can result. So there's a step that maybe isn't even super tied to enforcement per se, at least yet, but is an action step that addresses the issues and needs of residents while still maintaining the customer first mentality within specifically more of that commercial and retail and government core of what we're trying to do. And so I know certainly with respect to the business owners, they're wanting that turnover as much as possible, whether it's the resident from 5 blocks over who decides to drive or someone from out of town or passing through. So it is that turnover that is trying to be preserved. Owen, do you have anything to add on that?
I mean, that was one of the purposes of creating the guiding principles in the first place, was to ask, you know, what are the priority users for downtown? Who should we be managing our parking to support? What is the highest and best use of our on and off street parking systems? It's not to exclude anyone by any stretch, but it is to say, if we are to manage this supply in a way and make it as usable as possible, who should we be catering to in a kind of a tiered sort of approach? And that's kind of, it is what a little bit set the stage for some of these strategies in here. The customer first was something that came up as a way of addressing some of that. And it was actually very similar to the question that was prompted, is to say, if we don't have enforcement, what are the other ways that we can do some sort of program where we don't have a bunch of employees parking right in front of businesses? And that was one came up as a possibility. And I remember voicing it at one time, and it got, you know, some positive feedback there. And so we included it in one of these strategies as an option here. I think, as Chris pointed out, a lot of these strategies are not intended to be radical in any way. I think that the approach here is to create a welcoming space for folks to come downtown, to make sure that they have a good space, that things are clearly marked, and people have a good understanding of how they should use that space, whether it's for a certain amount of time or not. There's allowances in here. There are some policy elements that we did create, or that we wanted to create, for being able to institute a residential parking permit program, because there was a concern that there might be employee spillover in the neighborhoods. And so we try to address that by laying some groundwork that is necessary for being able to start one of those programs if and when down the road that might become an issue. And so the idea is that this strategy list is a bit of a roadmap to say like, okay, this is where you're at now, and it can hopefully address some of the issues that might be coming up in the next 5 to 10 years. Beyond that, you might need something more aggressive, I suppose, but that's not what we did with this particular plan here.
I would just add real quick, Commissioner Cavanagh or Councilman Cavanagh, that a couple of things on this that might be sort of amendable, if you will. If there are a handful of these recommendations that you all look at and go, this is really good, this is going to work great, but a handful that you're going, man, that's just not going to fly. If there's agreement on whatever those are, especially if there's just a few of those, that's clearly something that we can go out and we can remove if it makes everybody feel more comfortable taking the next step of adopting it in whatever way that you want. The other thing that's probably can be tweaked is the timing. So if you think that there's some of these recommendations that should be moved up or down because of whatever the preference is or capacity within the city, then again, that's something else that can certainly be tweaked. And so the rest of it, I think, to Owen's point, is it's really an excellent attempt at trying to give you that framework of recommendation and timelines and an expectation of cost. But ultimately, if that's what it takes for you all to be comfortable, given that you're going to be likely the implementer of many of these things, then that's what should be done.
Mr. Mayor, if I can.
Councilman Counter.
Chris, I think to that point, and that's where I'm trying to figure out where do we take the first step? Because something like a residential parking permit program on the surface isn't something that I would probably be comfortable right now recommending. I think I'm concerned about it from an enforcement standpoint, from an impact on our downtown residents' life and just the added bureaucracy that comes with that. However, right, if I was just talking to my good council member Taylor here, I would recognize if I live 1 block away from the 127 Club and I can't get in front of my house on a Saturday night, I might say, hey, that's the only solution that's available. So it's hard for me to say, yes, we should do this, or no, we shouldn't, without kind of hearing from my boss on that. And so that's where I understand, I appreciate this as a recommendation, but it's not something today I'm gonna be like, yes, let's get moving on that. Whereas other things, like I think the signage and the striping, like those are things that we should be doing immediately. Because to your point, it doesn't appear that we have a parking problem. We have a perceived available parking problem. And those are things in the short run, I think, that we can work to implement right away. And so that's where I apologize. I keep coming back to this. Help me know where you want us to begin so that we're giving you guys good feedback. We've got many of our MDC commissioners here that are giving up your time. You spend a significant amount of time. We want to make sure that it's valuable and rewarding for our colleagues as well.
And Mayor and Councilman, oh, go ahead, Owen. I think you want to jump in.
Sorry, I'll try to be brief. And points well taken. One of the things in here is that regarding the residential parking permit program is that, again, this is groundwork for when it is needed and necessary. As a matter of fact, we have language in these recommendations that it has to come from the neighborhood. If this is not something that the city would impose on a neighborhood ever, but if there is a concern with the neighborhood, that they can come forward and say, hey, we've noticed that a lot of employees are parking in front of our residents, but now we have this mechanism in place that we can do a study and to determine whether that's a problem, and to create the signage and to create the permit system itself. There's nothing in here that says that this will be instituted right away or anything like that. As a matter of fact, it's a long-term strategy for implementing something like this, and it would only be initiated by the residents themselves, not something that's imposed by the city itself. So that was just a little piece there. Go
I
ahead,
think it would
Chris.
be helpful, just for what it's worth, is to maybe take, for you as a council, to take this particular table and discuss when it's appropriate. It's gonna take a little bit more time, but discuss what in here you really like and want to elevate, what you like, but it's not quite ready for prime time, what you're questionable about, so let's put that on the back burner, and then what needs to go. What do you think that this is just something that's probably not gonna fly? And if that is a resolution that works for you all, then we can certainly take this document, adjust it as necessary to reflect those thoughts, make sure that everybody's, I think, and feels good about that. And then if it's ready for prime time for you all to adopt, then maybe that's the step forward. So there's maybe a recommendation.
Mr. Mayor?
Councilman Taylor.
Yeah, I liked how you suggested this is kind of a menu of ideas to consider. I do commend the work being that there's nothing crazy recommended, like, oh, build a $15 million parking structure
Right.
downtown to what end, right? And a lot of things on here actually would fall under not the city, but I'm thinking, for example, if you did a customer first parking program, that would seem like, there's some discussion about a business improvement district. Is that something that they would take on because business owners are kind of self-regulating themselves for the benefit of everybody? I like the idea of maybe thinking on what I would suggest taking out that I don't like. I will tell you just right off the bat, I think the license plate permitting seems, I don't see myself ever getting around to that because it's going to be a stretch just to get to maybe having a parking sticker in your window that says, this is reserved for residential parking. I think that's just thinking through how to implement that seems unreasonable. Is that a DMV/city? I just don't see us ever getting to that. So I think that doesn't make sense to be in there. I do agree with Councilman Kavner's suggestion about, we've had a lot of discussion about small businesses who are buying homes on the edge of downtown but they're also mixed with residential. So I think we're going to have a little bit of two worlds colliding where maybe it would make some sense to have that, but I just don't know. It just seems down the road a little bit. I don't know how we put our arms around that because that would be expensive. And if we did have a permitting program for that, we'd have to enforce it. Otherwise it would make no sense. So I'm not opposed to keeping the idea in there suggested. But I agree, there's things in here the city would be responsible for, and there's things in here a lot of things in here that are just our business owners and people downtown need to get organized and coordinated. And that would be totally appropriate to leave in this plan. I think as a city, we have to kind of decide, are there some things, near term we want to take action? I think Councilman Overton's suggestion or discussion about, depending on how these projects pan out, we may have a very different parking situation. And we don't know what that will look like. So we want to be open and flexible to that. But, I think I would probably want to be getting back, and we could probably, my guess would be, we could even just provide this individual feedback to the MDC, to that, if there's some ideas you don't have right now that you want to digest and get back to them so they can incorporate those ideas. But there are things here for us. There's a lot of things in here not for us, I think.
And Councilman Taylor, I think you hit the nail on the head from my perspective. Depending upon where you're going to put this document determines in a lot of ways what should be in here. Put it in here purely operational things that goes into a code for development versus not. If you want people to you want the right people to look at the right stuff at the right time in order to utilize it. Most of this is just recommendations from the city on how we should operate. Nothing to do with development, not just what we just talked about. The license plate reader has nothing to do with development, but that's an operational recommendation. And to be honest, our staff has already looked at that. And frankly, that's how we would do it. That is the cheapest, most efficient ways to use a license plate reader system for a residential parking system. We've already done some of these things and evaluated them just because we were anticipating that coming online across the street and the impact it was going to have on our residents. We want to be prepared with the information about some concepts. So we've done some of this advanced work, but depending upon where you live this document for what purpose, I think it even matters what's in here and why. That's really not, if someone's going to do a downtown development, they don't need to see stuff. Trying to read through to get to where the meat of the issue is about what they need to know. They don't even know about a license plate reader program for residential purposes. That's police department, that's community development, or that's clerks. So what's in here and where you put it, I think helps drives some of the conversations about feedback. And if you are going to give feedback, I'd encourage you to give the feedback, but then come back and tell everyone what everyone felt about the feedback so you can have a larger conversation. Because I've got some we all got things. Infrastructure, charging infrastructure mm-mm. That's just like, that's the private sector if they want to do that, not on our streets, but that's my opinion. That's not, should that be adopted by code? How's Caleb and his team going to be trying to apply that component if everything in here is just ideas and suggestions versus the things you really want to see implemented in that conversation? So that's what I'm going to just kind of put out there, is that where it lives and what your intentions are matters based upon what you say that should be relevant or not relevant. It's been part of my issue with this whole plan, because it's got so much in here that has nothing to do with downtown development. It's about how it operates in a lot of ways. Businesses, how they should do things, how cities should do things, how residents should do things. It's really, where do you want to put ordinances in place and resources to staff to implement those things, or ask our partners to do that. So I'll be quiet now.
Mr. Mayor?
Councilman Taylor.
Yeah, it's a really good point is, I could foresee keeping a majority of these recommendations in here as goals to strive towards over the next decade, right? Like 8 years from now, what's downtown Meridian going to look like? I have no idea. Could look like a bunch of unfinished projects, or it could be spectacular with a bunch of new projects and a really vibrant downtown. And then we have a whole new good problem on our hands. But to the mayor's point, if this is something that we're going to be asked to formally accept, and then the city is committing to implementing it, that's a different sort of set of feedback for you as to what we want to see in it versus what are good recommendations to leave in there for those who, like I said, the people who are voluntarily participating in this, the business community, et cetera. So I think it's a lot to think about. I will say this, in my mind, I can still provide you some specific feedback in October that's completely relevant, because we're going to be taking this on, month at a time, topic by topic for the next 6 months. So in my mind, I've not envisioned that today's the only day I'm going to talk about parking potentially. This is meant to sort of have the conversation, get the information out, provide some initial feedback, which we've given some, but certainly think we would keep it open for more specific feedback as we have a chance to kind of dig into it a little bit more.
And I would just add, Mayor and Council, that at the end of the day, parking is an asset and it's real estate, just like the building that the site that the buildings are located. And how can that asset be best maintained, maximized, and operated even, to entice development, to grow development in all the ways that your comp plan, downtown, this plan, and the objectives that you have and the partners that you have. And so this is where that needs to go, right? Is how do we get that? How does this move forward to the next, maybe it is a 5-year, 8-year type of a vision, because we know things are going to come online and that even our consumption behaviors have changed, right? We know that that's a big thing that has occurred over the last really 5-10 years. Amazon wasn't even around 15-20 years ago for the most part, right? So what does that look like in those short-term, especially those short-term actions that can be had immediately, to optimize that real estate and ensure that that asset is grown as much as anything else?
Mr. Mayor?
Councilman Taylor.
Yeah, I know we're going to want to be wrapping up here in the next little bit. We have several MDC commissioners here. I think I would like to extend the invitation to any of them who would like to share any perspective as they've gone through all these discussions, as they sort of lived it down there. Love to open it up to any of them if they would like to come share anything. Also, Administrator Squires, if she'd like to share anything as well, I think it'd be appropriate.
Well, as one of them thinks about coming up, the one thing I think that would be helpful, because I think how often should you go through and look at your parking time components? the main complaints we've gotten about downtown is when a hair salon went in and now they want their people to have 4 hours of parking. You know, so when our current standards were put in many years ago, they haven't really been modified that much over the last 15 years, to my knowledge. But should we be looking at them annually, every 3 years, or every time a major use changes in that area? And I think that's for our planning team to help lead those conversations. What are those best practices in terms of just when to evaluate?
Yeah, Owen, I don't know if you have an answer on the timing of things. I just think, I know, having worked in Caldwell, for example, I can't even tell you how many different projects over the years, and having listened to the very folks just like yourself, Councilman Overton, about just folks who were there 30 years ago, 40 years ago, who I recall distinctly telling me how they used to count bullet holes, literally, in the sides of buildings because there was just nothing going on. And now, as you've seen, their biggest issue is parking, right? It's in the news all the time, and the lack thereof. And they probably took a couple of steps maybe too far and didn't take the steps that maybe we're trying to look at today, and trying to prevent some of those steps from having to occur in years from now. So it is something that is iterative, and it's going to flex and change as projects come and go, or buildings, you know, are built, but then as occupants leave, that's going to happen too. So it is a moving target for sure. I don't know, Owen, if you had anything you wanted to add.
Just that, you know, I think a lot of communities that don't have like managed parking, that's typically what you find is you've got this smattering of different time limits, and usually those are done based on, you know, the adjacent land use, whether it's a hair salon or a dry cleaners or something to that effect. Well, like, well, if it's out in front of a dry cleaners, we need 15-minute spaces out there. We need 30-minute spaces, and then eventually that dry cleaners will close and then a new business opens, and all of a sudden you've got a 15-minute space in front of a restaurant, and which is not very appropriate for that. So unless there is some level of management, it's typically not done, is what would be my response. I think what you should do is every 3 to 5 years is do a parking study and to understand how the downtown is working, and take a look at what the inventory of your stalls look like, and make sure that you're recalibrating it to you know, your desired uses, and how you want the system to behave, whether you have extended time limits or if you want to have something that's going to be a really quick turnover system. You can design it the way you want it, but it typically doesn't get done unless there's some sort of oversight for it on a regular basis.
Thank you.
Mr. Mayor,
That's
one last comment. Well, two last comments. First, we have the police chief sitting here, and I saw he made eye contact with me, and I just want you to know that even back 30, 40 years ago, we luckily didn't have to count bullet holes in the side of buildings in the city of Meridian. But secondary to that, I'm very conscious of one area here which worries me a lot, and it's the one that was talked about a few times, and that's the residential permit zones. And I'll tell you why. We've had applications come in fact, not too long ago, and I sat down with Ashley from MDC and talked about the disappointment that it failed, but it was in the Old Town area, and it was going to be a small town library. And it was going to have events, and it was going to be really neat, and it would be such a good addition to that part of the city. But the problem was, one, they had no ADA parking. They had extremely limited parking on the street. And even if they only had, say, 11, 13 people at that business at one time, they were parking in front of all the neighbors' houses because that's what on their application was going to be the available parking. So in comes an idea coming from the same group about residential parking permits, and we choke a business out and send them down the road. So we have to be cognizant as we're looking at this stuff that there's two sides of the story. What do we want to see? We want to see some sort of a balance in our Old Town area. We want to see some of these old homes be redeveloped into businesses, if that's what we want to see. But at the same time, if we allow some sort of residential permit system to come in, we could choke out some of those businesses that are trying to move. So just thoughts as we move forward on those.
Okay. Oh, all right.
Brad Hoagland served on the committee, and just a quick comment. I sat here trying to think through, if I'm in your shoes, what would I do, you know? Anyway, Mr. Mayor and the council, there's been a lot of good comments here, and what would I do? This is not a be-all, end-all type of document. It's not here to force you to do something. A lot of study has gone into this and work from experts and looked at other issues and how it's handled around the country. These are options. And I think Councilman Taylor, you pointed out, you know, when the neighborhood comes to you, yes, that's an option you can consider, but it may not be what you want to do. Readers, you know, for license plates might be something that staff recommends. What I see looking forward is when we get to the end of Destination Downtown. And I happened to be on council back in 2009 when we first did this, and I think I still have the original document, and Councilman Overton was also participating in that. There's been a lot of research and study and ideas that go into this, and it's to serve as a guide. It's a blueprint. It's options that you can consider. So maybe the end result is you adopt a resolution that says, this is a document that we can utilize and we'll pull ideas from because of the studies and the subcommittees that have gone into this. And if a business comes to you and says, hey, Caleb, Mr. Hood, what are you guys doing about a parking plan? Well, let me point you to this guide, this Destinations Downtown, which gives us some options, but no guarantee that the council is going to do that. But these are things that would be considered as a possibility. So it's not something that's going to be prescriptive, but you guys will have to decide what you want to do in that particular situations, because we know it will change and things will continue to change in Meridian. We know that. And so it is something that I wanted to put that in your head, that moving forward with the whole document, it's something that you can say, okay, we accept this document, and there might be things you definitely want to take out. That's fine. But that we feel comfortable giving to people that saying, yeah, this is something you can look at and help in deciding is that we have ideas for, but doesn't mean we will consider them. So just want to let you know about that. Thank you.
All right. Council, any final comments? I know that there'll be offline engagement on additional conversations between now and the next month about what will be the topic. Will it be continuation of this? Will it be something else? And I trust Councilman Taylor will continue to work with Administrator Squires on that very topic, but I didn't know if there's anything that we need to do to wrap up this conversation today.
Mr. Mayor, just a quick
Councilman
question
Cameron.
for Mr. Neri. Bill, the mayor kind of talked about, hey, if you are passing along feedback via email to kind of share that with everybody, is there any concern that if I have feedback that I'm sending it to MDC, that I'm CCing the city council on my feedback? Do we create any serial meeting risks or any concern on your end about how we best communicate feedback so that everybody is seeing it?
Probably the best, Mr. Mayor, members of council, Councilmember Cavanagh, probably the best. I mean, if we do that to at least include the clerk, if you would like to be
Okay.
part of the record.
Okay.
Yeah, the meeting only becomes problematic if there's a lot of dialogue. I mean, sharing your thoughts and talking to the consultants and MDC, not concerning. It's when the group starts having more of an internal conversation.
Okay.
Mr. Mayor,
Councilman Taylor.
maybe just to kind of wrap this up and kind of next steps, I think certainly I would envision this continue to remain as sort of an open dialogue, and we can, I can meet with Administrator Squires. We can kind of talk about the next meeting we have if there's a desire to extend some of this discussion, or if we just move on to the next one, knowing that people can continue to contemplate some of these suggestions. I do think as we continue along with discussion of different topics, we as a council will continue to feel a greater sense of an idea of the purpose of the Destination Downtown document. This is just part of it. There's a lot to it. So it's not just about parking, there's a lot more to it. So I think my request and sort of expectation for everyone would be that we just sort of kind of continue to feel free to provide that feedback. And I like Councilman Kavanaugh, I appreciate you sort of helping us kind of understand a productive way to provide some of that feedback. Again, keeping in mind the feedback we provide, MDC can still take that and discuss and decide how they may or may not want to amend the final document. So with that, I appreciate the time everyone's spent to come here. We look forward to a few more discussions over the next few months on that.
All right, with that, Councilman Cameron,
All right, move that we adjourn our work session.
Second.
have a motion and a second to adjourn. All in favor, signify by saying aye.
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 Opposed, nay. The ayes have it. We are adjourned. Council will call the meeting to order. For the record, it is July 22nd, 2025 at 6 PM. We'll begin tonight's regular city council meeting with roll call attendance.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Councilman Cavanagh.
Here.
Councilwoman Little Roberts. Here. Councilman Taylor.
Here.
Councilman Overton.
Here.
Councilman Whitlock.
Here.
Mayor Simonson.
Here. Next item up is the Pledge of Allegiance. If you'd all please rise and join us in the pledge. Okay, we had no one sign up for the community invocation, so we'll move on to adoption of the agenda.
Mayor,
Councilman Kavner.
we adopt the agenda as presented.
Second.
I have a motion, a second to adopt the agenda. Is there any discussion? If not, all in favor, signify by saying aye.
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 Opposed, nay. The ayes have it, and the agenda is agreed to. Madam Clerk, can we sign up under public forum?
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. No one has signed up.
Okay, then with that, we will move on to item 1, which is a community presentation from the Meridian Police Department regarding Officer Rodriguez, recipient of the Enrique S. Camarena Award. So I'll turn this over to Chief Ambassador Chea.
If you don't mind, I'll turn the dais around, so I'd rather look at them than you, sorry. So the reason that we are here tonight is to recognize Officer Robert Rodriguez, one of our school resource officers. He has been named the 2024-2025 recipient of the Enrique Kiki Camarena Award for the state of Idaho. He was formally recognized earlier this summer by the Idaho Elks Association at a convention held on June 7th at the center of the universe, Wallace, Idaho. And we're here to honor him tonight. This recognition is presented annually by the Benevolent and Protective Order of the Elks Drug Awareness Commission, which is very involved with the Meridian Anti-Drug Coalition, and we're very thankful for your involvement with that. It honors law enforcement professionals who demonstrate an unwavering commitment to drug prevention and education. Officer Rodriguez was selected by his peers for exemplifying the principles and values championed by DEA Special Agent Enrique S. Camarena: sacrifice, integrity, and dedication to public service. For those of you who don't know, Special Agent Camarena's life was tragically taken in 1985 while fighting drug trafficking, and he remains a symbol of courage and purpose in the law enforcement community. The award bearing his name continues to honor those who work tirelessly to protect and educate their communities. As a school resource officer with the Meridian Police Department at Mountain View High School, Officer Rodriguez has dedicated himself to building trust with students, promoting healthy decision-making, and creating a safe and supportive environment for Idaho's youth. His ability to connect with children and provide a positive, impactful presence in their daily lives is recognized as a rare and invaluable gift. This marks the second time a Meridian Police Department officer has received this distinguished honor. In 2021, Officer Leroy Sonata was also named the Camarena Award recipient, underscoring the department's ongoing dedication to the meaningful youth engagement and substance abuse prevention. One thing I would point out too is this really highlights the work that our school resource officers do every day in West Ada School District, and the high bar that they set for those other school resource officers around the state. And we're very appreciative of all of that. So with that, we would like to congratulate Officer Rodriguez on his well-deserved recognition and thank him for his ongoing commitment to public service and to the students and student advocacy and for drug prevention and drug awareness. So if you'd come up, Robert, we'll present you with the plaque from the Idaho Elks Association. We also have the bust that will stay with Robert for over the next year, and another plaque that will have his name on it as well with the other awardees.
I just want to say thank you to Susie, and come on up here, Susie, with Susie with the Elks Lodge, also a member of the MADC. And thank you to the gals over at the MADC. You guys are amazing. And most importantly, my wife, come on. Nope, come on up. For putting up with my 17-year career in law enforcement to date, for being an amazing woman and best friend. So. I really don't have a whole lot to say. I don't speak a whole lot. I just want to mention how large the print is for the chief to read this stuff. I'll be there one day, I'm sure.
We're very proud of him. We're very proud of him, and we sure had a lot of fun in Wallace.
Shh, you said you weren't going to tell
I
anybody.
didn't say anything.
All right, good.
Well, Officer Rodriguez, on behalf of myself and the council, congratulations. And I'll just say this, whenever you go to Mountain View, you make a world of difference for everyone around you, and it's clear. So appreciate what you do, and horns up. Okay. With that, we will move on to the rest of our scheduled work for this evening. So next up will be a public hearing on item H 2025-0008. And we will open this public hearing with staff comments.
Okay, I was giving everyone a chance to funnel out. So good evening, Mayor and council members. Linda Ritter, Planning Department. So tonight we are here for an annexation and conditional use permit for property located at the southwest corner of McMillan Road and Oahe Storm Avenue. This site consists of 2.5 acres of land. We are annexing 2.69 acres of land from RUT in Ada County to R15 zoning district and a conditional use permit to allow for the development of the Idaho Power Substation. So this application went through a record of survey in the county to parcel out this 2.5 acres, because normally county property is 5 acres per lot, but they allowed this one-time split for the 2.5 acres. So that they are proposing the construction of this new substation to enhance the reliability and resilience of electrical services in Meridian and the surrounding areas of Ada County. Currently, customers in this region are served by Can Ada substation in Nampa and the 10 Mile substation in Meridian. So the rapid ongoing growth throughout the Treasure Valley has placed increased demand on these existing facilities, leading to service strain and reduced reliability. The proposed substation is strategically designed to accommodate future growth and development while also alleviating pressure on the existing infrastructure. By rerouting service lines, the new facility will not only serve new residents and commercial customers, but also improve service continuity and reliability for current users. The site is proposed to be developed with the substation that includes up to 2 transformers, each to serve 4 distribution feeders, up to 2 breakers beneath the transmission termination structure, up to 2 metal-clad structures, which manage the switching of distribution feeders, 1 small control building, which houses racks of switches and communication equipment, and 1 transmission dead-end structure, which connects with the transmission line on McMillan Road. So the public utility major public infrastructure is a permitted use in the R15 district upon approval of a conditional use permit in compliance with the specific use standards per the UDC. Staff has determined that the proposed project aligned with these standards and is essential to support the area's long-term utility needs. Access to the property will be via McMillan Road and the Hawaii Storm. So it's designed to meet the standards in accordance with the ACHD requirements. These 2 access points are necessary to safely accommodate the maneuvering of large transport vehicles during infrequent deliveries of major electrical equipment such as transformers, breakers, metal-clad switchgear to the substation. Under typical operation conditions, a single access point would generally be sufficient to support routine inspection and maintenance activities. The substation yard will be gravel to allow for safe operation of the ground grid system underneath the service. The gravel is specific for utility use. It's a typical 3-inch rock that also allows for water drainage. Since no vehicle parking occurs within the substation, the applicant is not proposing to pave the surface inside the yard. Although the development of the power station is located within a residential zone, the applicant is proposing a 30-foot landscape buffer along the west side of the property to mitigate any noise that may generate, along the west and south side to mitigate any noise that may be generated from the substation. Although there's no building, the applicant is proposing an 8-foot tall precast stamped concrete wall along McMillan and Owyhee Storm Avenue frontages. Staff is also requiring the wall to be extended around the whole substation, basically because it is abutting residential zones. So they will be required to go through a certificate of zoning compliance and design review prior to building permit issuance for the wall. The comprehensive plan goal is to require appropriate building design and landscaping elements to buffer, screen, beautify, and integrate commercial, multifamily, and parking lots into existing neighborhoods. Although this has not been developed yet, but this is zoned for residential, and we are looking at development applications that may come in for residential in this area. So the maximum height of fences and wall within residential zone is 6 feet. The applicant is requesting alternative compliance through a separate permit outside of this process to increase the height of the proposed wall to 8 feet in order to maintain site security and deter trespassing. So at a later date, upon approval of the annexation. So they had requested barbed wire on top of a fence for them, but barbed wire is not allowed within residential areas, so staff is not in agreement with that. And then also the applicant will be asking for a DA provision that would allow deferral of landscape installation until development occurred within the field district, citing the current lack of available water in the area. But however, there is water within the Owyhee Storm Avenue. There is a 12-inch water line, and it goes to the intersection of Owyhee and McMillan Road. Staff does not have a timeline for when the development, particularly on properties adjacent to the subject site, will move forward. While irrigation infrastructure is not available yet, city water is available within the Hawaii Storm, and there is an existing irrigation ditch and box that is located along the northern portion of the property. The applicant has approached Public Works staff regarding temporary use of city water for landscaping until an irrigation pump can be installed. Public Works doesn't have any objection to enter into an agreement allowing the use of city water for a 5-year period, after which the irrigation pump must be operational. Per UDC 11-3B-14, all required landscape and irrigation system and site features must be installed in accordance with the approved landscape plan prior to the final project approval, as there is no separate occupancy approval process. So staff does not support the applicant's request, as there is no mechanism to delay this landscaping installation, which is a required component of the development. Deferring the landscape would hinder the establishment of a mature vegetative buffer, which is essential to provide adequate screening for future adjacent residential development. So the commission recommended approval with the conditions that were outlined in our staff report. This issue of deferring the landscape, I don't think it was brought up at the Planning and Zoning Commission meeting. We did talk about the wall, but this came after the hearing, so just wanted to put this front and center before you. We had no one commenting on the application other than the applicant and the property owner. Again, the only discussion that really took place was about the concrete stone wall surrounding the entire property rather than a chain link fence on the south and west side of the properties. We have had no comments since the hearing. And other than that, staff will stand for any questions that you may have, but I do have Clint here to talk about the water in the roadway if you have questions.
Thank you, Linda. And Clint, you look so much happier to be here than on vacation. Council, any questions for staff?
Fair.
Councilman Cavanagh.
Linda, just one question for you about this request to forgo the landscape buffer until development has occurred in the Fields District. Is there any specificity provided about that? I mean, there is development that has already occurred within the Fields District, and so I'm trying to figure out what it is they were trying to accomplish. Was it, again, more about maybe a miscommunication about the lack of services, or was there something else that was driving it?
The applicant will be able to explain this more to you. We've had a meeting. It is my understanding they've talked with Nampa Irrigation District because first I thought this was under Settlers Irrigation, but it's under Nampa Irrigation District. There is water that flows through here, but I think it floods the field for irrigation right now. It flows across the field from the south of the property. But again, there is an irrigation box, and irrigation also flows from this side across through here and on through. And then there's some kind of concrete ditch along here where water flows. But I don't know if it's just flooded. I didn't get a chance to talk to anyone from the irrigation district. I think, I'm not sure. I think the applicant can better explain why they would like to do this. It's just not something that staff is in support of. We'd like to see this corner looking nice.
Thanks. I have no other questions, Mr. Mayor.
Council, any additional questions for staff? All right, and then will the applicant like to come forward?
Thank you, Mr. Mayor, members of council. Stephanie Hopkins with KM Engineering. Our address is 5725 North Discovery Way in Boise.
David Hazel, 1221 West Idaho Street, Idaho Power.
Thank you for considering our request this evening. I'm here with Idaho Power to request annexation into the R15 district and a conditional use permit for public infrastructure for the McDermott substation, which is in Northwest Meridian. Linda did an awesome job of giving an overview of our request, and we'll keep our presentation pretty short. Did you get my presentation? Thank you. Am I able to control it or, okay. So Idaho Power has worked with adjacent property owner in this area to locate the substation in this area specifically. They plan to build the substation here to serve this area of Meridian and Ada County. As we all know, Meridian, specifically in this area, is growing very quickly. This is in the field sub-area plan, which is anticipated to include a mixture of uses, industrial, commercial, residential, and multifamily uses. And there are projects that are being contemplated currently that will be directly adjacent to this site. So that's when I think staff was saying the Fields District, that's probably the project that they were speaking of. And that's what our request is for pressurized irrigation and landscaping, which we will provide more information about a little bit later. So the objective of this is to provide reliable and adequate electricity in this area and for all of Ada County. So this is a graphic just to show how this all works. Substations are the point in which Idaho Power serves their customers directly. As this graphic shows, there are multiple ways in which power is generated. It's moved from a larger switching station to transmission lines and then to businesses, homes, and users. Idaho Power's objective is to meet the demand of existing and future customers in this area while relieving existing facilities. Currently, customers in this area are served by the Can-Ada substation, which is Nampa, and the 10-mile substation in Meridian. This substation, the McDermott substation, will connect to the existing north side substation with a new 138 kilovolt wire from the existing 230 kilovolt transmission line poles, those large apparatus along McMillan. This is located at the southwest corner of Owyhee Storm and McMillan, close to Owyhee High School. There are proposed to be 2 points of access, one to McMillan and one to Owyhee Storm. Both will be secured with gates. There will be, the entire yard will be securely fenced. And as staff mentioned, initially we were requesting to have 2 of our boundaries with chain link. And since then, Commission has recommended that those boundaries, the south and west boundary of the site, include the precast concrete wall, which is what's proposed on the north and east. We think that with this addition, that a request to defer landscaping will be a little bit more palatable. It'll be a presentable and nice project until landscaping is installed and future development comes through. So let's see, the internal yard is going to be gravelled. This site is designed to include 2 transformers, 2 breakers, 2 component metal clad. Transmission will come in from the dead end, which will go into the transformer, which steps the electricity down from 138 kilovolts to 4 12.5 kilovolt distribution feeders that will go out to customers through the metal clad. Commission recommended that we include the precast concrete wall as mentioned, and our request this evening is we have 2 requests. So we would like to request that a DA provision be added to allow landscaping and pressurized irrigation to be deferred until future development comes in. There are several projects in the field district that are being contemplated currently, and within a certain time frame, they will come in and bring services with them. And we just think that it's realistic and logical that landscaping be installed with that development, so it's all cohesively done at the same time. Our second request is to extend the conditional use permit timeframe from 2 years to 5 years, just to allow this a little bit more time to commence the use of the public infrastructure. They anticipate that it'll happen within the 2-year timeframe, but it would be nice to make sure they have a little extra time if needed. So we really appreciate Linda and Public Works' coordination and help on the different components of this project. We have been working with them and did mention it in our last meeting with the commission that we were hoping to defer or work through some kind of solution to defer the pressurized irrigation and landscaping. And just working with them in general on all of the components of this project has been great. So really appreciate that. And thank you for your consideration this evening. We'll stand for questions.
Thank you. Council, any questions for the applicant?
Mr. Mayor,
Councilman Taylor.
your request, the second request to have the CUP granted, extended from 2 years to up to 5 years, is that because you need the time to install the new transmission line and all the permitting that's required, or like, can you just get a little more detail about why you would need that extra time for that kind of buffer that you're looking for?
So we're kind of working off our proposed timeline, right, when this project was kicked out. I mean, there's a lot of variables leading up to this project that could extend our time frame. Ideally, we want to complete this project within 2 years, but if there's an issue with equipment or something else within the site that could extend our project duration out, I think that's kind of why we're asking for the extension, is if we do run into any of those issues as we're getting materials coming in, you know, something pushed on our side as far as design, that we're still covered if we push a year or two.
And can you say your name for the record, please?
David Hazel, Idaho Power.
Thank you.
Mr. Mayor, quick follow-up.
Councilman Taylor.
So on the landscaping pressurized irrigation being deferred, so, you know, I understand the staff commenting like there's really no way for us to sort of make sure you do it, right? If, other than on my honor, I'll do it kind of a thing. So, and I think that's a good point. Obviously, Idaho Power is a wonderful company, track record in the state, but how do we have any assurance that it'll get done and done right if we don't have any way to ensure that it gets done, if we give you that ability right now?
Mayor, Councilman Taylor, I think you bring up a good point. Idaho Power is a different, I would say partner, community partner with the city. They're not your typical developer. I think they are perhaps in a different circumstance than most developers. And I think that there's an opportunity to probably work through some kind of agreement with them. Maybe, you know, through this application, through the development agreement, maybe there could be a memorandum of understanding or something that's attached. We're asking for a situation that's not typical, right? And I think that that's merited based on the public utility component of it. We've been trying to creatively think of solutions too. And I think a development agreement provision is probably the easiest way up front. With maybe in the provision, we say that there has to be an agreement on the side that's, you know, checked up on or something along those lines. I don't know if city attorney maybe has any ideas, but.
And Ms. Area, would a surety not work in this situation?
What, sir?
The surety bond, would that not work in this situation?
Well, we certainly can. I mean, there's usually a time limit,
Correct.
but otherwise, yeah, that's one method we could do.
So surety bond would work. And yeah, it's a time limit, but you could either pay the entire amount to pull it, or a portion of it, depending upon the time frame that's identified.
Mayor, I think Idaho Power is amenable to that, and, you know, maybe just, we could discuss further with staff to see what the parameters on that are, or, but they're willing to work with that. I think that would be a favorable outcome.
And I think that kind of helps to relieve some of our irrigation and landscaping concerns as well, if that's deferred, I should say.
Yeah, absolutely. If we were able to do a surety to, you know, put up a bond for the amount of money that would be required for the landscaping and the pressurized irrigation, I think that would give Idaho Power the ability to defer it in the way that they want to, and making the city able to actually make it right eventually.
I'll defer to council's viewpoint and staff on how easy that is, but
Mr. Mayor,
Councilman McCover.
I appreciate, I think you get a creative approach to this. I am curious to kind of hear how our staff would respond to this type of request and their ability to manage that as well. An important consideration.
So Mayor, Council, we have been in that situation before. We have a project that is at the corner of 10 Mile and McMillan Road. That was a plat that was approved, and they did the same thing, bonded for their landscaping. And to date, that landscaping has not been installed, and that bond is still there. I don't know how valid that bond is, but The city has, not saying that Idaho Power would do this, but the city has been burned by putting in, having someone bond for the landscaping and never put in the landscaping. And as far as this project, if we are waiting for the development that is adjacent to this, we just don't know when that will come in. I know we have been working with the property owners, looking at doing some development there, but the phases that are close to this property are not something that is immediate, that will happen anytime soon. So I don't know how far out that development would be, and if we waited for that, we don't know when that landscaping might go in. So staff has talked internally about this. And we just don't, there's no time frame for when that development will come in. And as, again, our code says with development, this is all supposed to go in. The city has offered an option for irrigation for the landscaping that should assist with putting this landscaping in, because we would like to see some mature landscaping on this property, because you have a 30-foot buffer to the south and a 30-foot buffer to the west to help mitigate this substation for when the residential development does come in. We don't want it to be like new landscaping that's coming in that's not going to provide a sufficient buffer for this residential. So we have been upfront with the applicant that we're not in support of this based on our code and some of the issues that we've had with bonding for landscaping. So again, you guys get to make the final call. That's just staff's position on this.
Well, it depends. I imagine, I don't want to talk about the other situation in that context, but if people are not adhering to their bond, we have a different issue to address, because we should be able to execute that bond and have the work done if it's past due. But if it hasn't reached the requirements of the DA, that's a different story. So I think it depends on how it's determined, because you could do a bond that says you have 5 years, and then within 5 years, you'll either put it in yourselves or we'll execute the bond for you to have it done for you. Because to me, you were like asking for up to 5 years. Well, it seems like 5 years is a great time frame. The landscaping needs to be put in one way or the other. If that's what you're asking for, I think it's fair for us to achieve that same outcome, however we choose to alleviate the points that have been raised by staff. But in 2 cents, Councilman Taylor.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Can you just walk me through again the reasons why you want to defer? Is it just the uncertainty of timing? Is it the uncertainty of access to pressurized irrigation water? Would you just remind me kind of why you want that deferral?
Yeah, I can field that one. So, I mean, it's really the lack of pressurized irrigation. And there was that depiction up earlier, I think, Linda, you pulled up with the irrigation box on the north side of our property. So I was able to meet with Mark Phillips. He's a private water owner out there. That water is part of the Nampa Meridian system, but they don't own that ditch, is my understanding. And so basically meeting with Mark, that vault that was shown on that drawing, I don't have it up here, but basically that's just a drain. So we don't have any surface water readily available to us on our property, because he's flood irrigating from the south to the north up to our property, right? So basically, our surface water is going to end at our substation. So we're not going to want to flood our whole yard, right? So we don't have an option to drop a pump into that vault like we were talking earlier, unfortunately. The other option, I think, was the city water as well, right? Which we're open to. I guess the biggest challenge I see there is I'm kind of hoping for like a final solution with this, right? So if we're putting in city water and we're going to be required to come back and hook up to the pressurized irrigation system once it's available, we're going to be spending additional dollars to reconfigure our system to tie into that, right? So I guess point I'm trying to make is our hope would be is that once that pressurized irrigation is available, we can start our plannings out there and meet the code requirements associated with that.
Mr. Mayor?
Councilman Taylor.
I think that sounds reasonable, but you're also asking for a window of 2 to 5 years. So if you're hoping for some certainty about what your configuration is for the pressurized irrigation, and I understand that it seems like there's a few moving parts here that we don't have all of our arms around in terms of what's where and what we have.
Right.
My understanding would be that the city water would be sufficient pressurized water for that. And it may be 2, 3, or 5 years or beyond before you would have access to pressurized irrigation water. And I don't know how that issue is going to be resolved. If we required you to, if we didn't give you the deferral and you're required to have the city water, there's no objection. You could do that. You just don't want to have to change that configuration maybe in whatever time frame that is when the pressurized irrigation comes back. Am I tracking correctly?
Right, and I mean, it's bigger picture too, right? It's all kind of falling back on the cost associated with this stuff and trying to rework stuff we've already put in. You know what I mean? I just don't want to go shell out additional dollars if we're reworking something just to get us by in the interim, if that makes sense, versus having a complete system that's readily available. We can tie into it and do what we need to do on the perimeter of our yard.
Mr. Mayor?
Councilman Taylor.
So do you have any idea what it would look like to move from a pressurized system supplied by the city to irrigation? Because
I mean, it's, I'm sorry, go ahead.
just to finish my point, because the irrigation, system to provide the water, that's not going to have to change. It's just going to how you're going to tie into it.
Right.
So I'm having a hard time tracking how expensive that might be, considering the significant scale of infrastructure that's going to go into this anyway. So help me understand, do you know what it would take to switch from city pressurized water to irrigation? And I don't know if you know the answer to that.
I'm gonna throw out a round number, right? That I'm gonna ballpark off the top of my head. I'm gonna say $15,000, which $15,000 isn't nothing, right? I mean, that's something that we're gonna have this project closed out. This is gonna be in operation. And then we're gonna have to come back and spend that additional money for stuff that we already have functional to tie into that PI system when it's available. I guess what I'm trying to avoid is just the additional rework, right? Additional dollars associated with that. So if we come off the city water, if that's the final solution, that's, we can do that. But I think the preference would be is to come off the PI system once it's available. So we're not, using water from the city water to feed our plantings, basically.
Mr. Mayor,
Councilman Overton.
either one of you, Stephanie, or you could just talk to, if you don't want to landscape it, what is it going to look like?
There you go. So that decorative concrete wall is, I mean, there were some depictions up there earlier, but that's basically what the perimeter would look like. It's basically a precast wall. It's stamped. It's got some decorative elements in it, depending on, which route we go. But that would be kind of the focus of the substation, right? Is that concrete wall. You wouldn't have the trees on the perimeter. We were talking about putting maybe xeriscape and some permabark down on that 30-foot swath potentially, which we could still do without the water there. Yeah, I guess, does that answer your question?
Mr. Mayor, follow up.
Councilman Overton.
Well, it does and it doesn't yet, because the trees do need water,
Correct.
and you're putting in a xeriscape landscaping. I'm just curious, how are you watering the trees if there's nobody out there?
Like physically? Is that what you're asking?
Yes.
Well, if we have a source as of being either the city water or the PI system, we can set that up on a regular schedule off a drip system. Water our plants.
You use the city water for the trees on the xeriscape landscape.
No, sorry, let me back up. I'm saying the xeriscape is what we would try to do as part of the interim period between that and the pressurized irrigation being available. Once the pressurized irrigation is available, we would use that water to plant those trees and keep them alive.
My mistake is I'm looking.
If we hooked up to city
xeriscape
water,
here.
we have the same thing, but it goes back to the point of I'm trying to avoid the rework and additional costs if we possibly can, right?
How about we shade you landscaping for moving the poles on McMillan over just a little bit to allow that road to be widened? Seems like a deal to me. Okay. All right. Oh, well, did anyone sign up to provide testimony on this item?
Mr. Mayor, no one has signed up.
Okay, is there anybody in the audience that would like to provide testimony, just so we at least know where we stand? I'm not seeing anyone coming forward or raising their hand, so we'll let you stay there until council is either done with questions or ready to close the public hearing, unless you have any final comments that you want to try to make at this point.
Mr. Mayor,
Councilman Taylor.
you just
I heard a pop in the system. He's got bills.
Can you just tell me, and maybe staff can help too, I'm curious about the conversations with the Nampa Irrigation District. Is there, I mean, it sounds like some changes to the system have to be in place for you to have access. And I'm not totally tracking what all changes need to be. Can you provide some insight, like what will have to happen before you'll have access to that? And I don't know if Linda, if you know the answer to that, or David, what conversations you've had where you have any idea what they're going to have to do in order to provide you with that?
You just mean the PI system?
Yes, correct.
They're just gonna get it to our property. I
And,
believe it's coming from the west to the east, right?
and did you have any sense of time frame from them, like of how that's going to happen?
I think it's still kind of up in the air at this point.
Because it seems like we just have no clue when you're gonna have access to that. It could be in next year, it could be in 5 years, it could be like Nampa Irrigation District will just do whatever they want because water rules everything. So I'm just having a hard time tracking when we could have any expectation of that. And it just seems very vague and open-ended. And Linda, I don't know if you've had any communication with them that, because I read the letter on that in the application, it's very unhelpful.
Mayor, Councilmember Taylor, correct. The Nampa Irrigation District did not provide much information. And I think from the conversation we've been having, are you guys waiting for the development to occur that's adjacent to you to bring that over to your property, or?
Yes, that's my understanding.
And I guess that's the city's issue. We don't know when that development is coming, and so we don't have a time frame. There's a lot of unknowns, so that's staff's position on it, so.
Mr. Mayor,
Councilman Overton.
still trying to grasp my head around what this is eventually going to look like. What landscaping is your final plan?
Mr. Mayor, Councilman Overton, we do have a landscape plan that shows 30 feet along the west and south boundary. And then if it's on the screen now, there's a variety of vegetative ground cover and a mixture of evergreen and deciduous trees that's shown on the landscape plan. So this is what, is required by code, and this is what's being provided as part of the conditional use permit. There is an option in code to do xeriscaping, which is kind of what David was alluding to, would provide, same vegetation, similar vegetation, more rockscape, and there are certain standards you'd have to meet. Still requires pressurized irrigation, obviously, to keep the vegetation in place and healthy, but would require less water. So that's an option, I think, once pressurized irrigation is available. But our request to you is that there be a DA provision or something, some kind of agreement that would allow them to defer the requirement for pressurized irrigation and landscaping just currently, period, essentially, until development to the west comes in and brings in pressurized irrigation so that it could all be completed cohesively and together at the same time. So, and we recognize that the timeline is tricky. That's the big thing that we've been trying to wrap our minds around too. And I think that's where, it's important to remember that Idaho Power is not a typical developer. And I think there's an opportunity to kind of work through some kind of agreement or solution that would work for everyone.
Mr. Mayor, follow up.
Councilman Overton.
So if I'm looking at this picture on the left,
Yes.
talking greenscape, if you had irrigation water as we went through this right now and you put everything in, it wouldn't be xeriscape, am I correct?
Mr. Mayor, Councilman, yes.
So is there any reason I shouldn't logically figure that if you pay the money to put in a xeriscape and then you get your water, you're not going to also then pay to have all that removed so you can go back in and do the landscaping right? And it might be cheaper to pay the $15,000 to hook up to the irrigation? It seems like if you're putting in xeriscape now and you're going to have to yank that out to put in the greenery in the future.
Mr. Mayor, Councilman Overton, I'll restate so the xeriscaping is really another option if pressurized irrigation is available. It wouldn't be an option without pressurized irrigation because you wouldn't be able to keep the vegetation healthy and alive. So right now, we're proposing to just defer any kind of landscaping until pressurized irrigation is available. So the xeriscaping would be an option that we had considered that would require less water in the future when they do hook up to pressurized irrigation. Does that make sense? It's a little convoluted.
I might have made that more difficult when I stated my answer earlier too. When I said xeriscape, I was just referring to before we put the plantings in, before we get water, we could put some rock mulch on the borders of this thing to make it look pretty until we have the water to get the plants in.
And Mr. Mayor, Council.
Yes, so I'm trying to tie up. I want to, because obviously I don't want to see this as dirt. I want to see it landscaped. But if you're landscaping it and I see this picture on the left and it's all green, and then I see the gravel, my logic is you're going to have to rip all that back out and then put in the landscaping that you would initially intend to put in.
Mr. Mayor, Councilman Overton, I think that there is an image in our presentation that shows some like substations that have a similar, it's kind of a rock mulch they put out in front of. This is really common in Ada County. So the project on the right with the trees obviously wouldn't be included if we were to defer the landscaping, but the rock mulch would be included with the 8-foot precast concrete wall. And that does, I mean, it provides a nice frontage in the interim, we think. It's I think a good solution while they wait for pressurized irrigation to come. So that's what they would propose. It would be the kind of decorative rock mulch with the precast concrete wall.
Mr. Mayor, follow up for staff.
Councilman Overton.
Is that consistent with the landscape plan that was submitted that was seen by planning and zoning?
No, that's not what was, the landscape plan this is what was, recommended for approval by, Planning and Zoning Commission. And I just want to make a clarification. So it's not xeriscape, it's water conserving. So what it does is reduce the landscape buffer by 50%. And you do more water conserving, plants within there. But it's kind of more like, simulated riverbed boulders and things that go along there. But you still have to have your irrigation system, but that's not what was proposed with this development. If it's something that they are asking for, because what we would look at is what was approved with this DA, with this, what you guys would approve. So this is the landscape plan that has gone through the process. We don't have anything different. So if they're proposing something different, that is something that we need to look at to make sure that they are meeting the requirements. And again, it doesn't take away the irrigation obligation. So I don't know, it's like, I don't know if, and I keep hearing you say that you would have to go back and redo all this. I don't know if it's something that can be looked at ahead of time as far as how you lay out your irrigation to say when that irrigation comes, how you would hook up to what you're putting in with the, say if you did use city water and then, but plan it for when you do hook up your pressurized irrigation, that you don't have to realign your lines with that, but.
And I understand what you're saying there. I guess my comment was, I'm thinking of a bare minimum, right? We got to get somebody out there to dig these pipes up once the pressurized irrigation's in, kill everything basically, and then tie everything back into what they'd done previously. So I think that $15,000 number, right? I'm just using that as kind of like a ballpark right now, right? But I mean, end of the day, it's still additional costs that we're incurring, and that's what I'm trying to avoid.
I think, can I just mention one thing too? I think the mayor brought up a really good option that we had kind of considered too, was the idea of a surety that would be placed with the city and would really give you the reassurance that this would happen in the future. And I think, you know, that could be tied to the development agreement in a way that would be easy to enforce, or easier to enforce than maybe some other things. So that's probably what we would defer to as, you know, a preference if that's something that you're all amenable to.
Mayor? As far as the surety, because you did mention that there is a timeline on the surety. And so we have not established a timeline at this point. So do you guys have a timeline that you're looking at? Because that's the thing that staff doesn't know. We don't have a timeline. And so it can't be out there for infinity. So
I Mr. Mayor, members of council and staff, I think, I mean, we've acknowledged that it's tricky, right? We don't know exactly when things are going to develop. We don't know when pressurized irrigation is going to be available. And so that's why we're kind of asking for solutions and trying to think creatively how to, marry both the cities, what the city wants and what Idaho Power is hoping to do. And I think you all serve the same constituents and the same people. So the goal is to try to give their customers rates that are great and try to make sure that the city is getting what they want on property too. So I mean, but yeah, we acknowledge that the timing is tricky and we don't know I don't have a solution for that, unfortunately.
Mr. Mayor,
Councilman Overton.
just got to throw this out there. It's not usual that we end up with an application in front of us that's been changed since it's gone in front of planning and zoning and been approved. And in this case, we also have a situation where that development could happen in 6 years and we could put a surety bond on for 5 years. You're still paying 15 grand, or maybe you're paying 25 grand because it's 5 years from now and it costs more money. I'm having a real hard time justifying why we need to do that and not stay consistent with how we operate as a city.
Mr.
I
Mayor.
think it's going to
Councilman.
cost them more for a surety bond long-term, but that's how they want to do it. That's their choice or your choice. I don't want to say it's their choice. It's not, if it's not even an option, don't even put it out there.
Mr. Mayor, Councilman Overton, I want to just clarify, we haven't changed anything with the applications. The landscape plan that's in front of you right now is what we presented with the conditional use permit, and that is what Idaho Power intends to install once pressurized irrigation is available. Our request this evening is to add a DA provision to the DA to allow them to defer that landscaping. So if you were to approve it tonight without that DA provision, they would be required to install this landscaping. They're not proposing xeriscaping. It's just something that code allows and that had been contemplated at one point. This is what's being proposed.
And I guess I'd just like to add, I mean, if it is a requirement that we're to put this landscaping in, as part of our build out, certainly possible with the city water. I just want to be clear that Idaho Power is incurring additional costs to try and reconfigure stuff that isn't necessarily there. We're hoping it's going to be there, right? I think that's just kind of the main point. But I mean, if we have to tap onto the city water and we have to have irrigation, I understand that. I guess I just kind of want to, bring it clear that we're incurring additional costs that in turn can.
Thank you for the conversation. It's really nice to be able to just discuss and kind of figure out.
Well, you're getting more money from me each month now with the new PUC rules on solar. So consider that my contribution to the project. Sorry, that was for you, Paris. Yes,
Mr. Mayor,
Councilman
can you hear
Whitlock.
me?
Councilman Whitlock, yes.
Thank you, Mayor. Stephanie and David, thank you. Just to build off of what Councilman Overton was asking, just in my mind, if this gets the green light tonight with a development agreement that at some point you will put in the landscape, once you get out there, start putting the transformers in, you put the 8-foot decorative wall up, what will be on that 30-foot buffer to the north, south, east, and west until development comes and you're able to tap into the PI? What will this look like for up to 5 years if this gets the green light tonight as is with the development agreement that you're requesting?
Sorry to interrupt you. Some of these images that you're seeing up here right now, if you can see them, is basically what it would look like without the trees and everything. I mean, the image on the right has trees in there, but we could just remove those and you'd have the rock mulch and the concrete wall.
Mayor, just a quick follow-up. So again, the concern that this just would have a nice decorative precast wall and be surrounded by dirt is not what you would envision for the next 2 to 5 years once this substation goes in.
Mr. Mayor, Councilman Whitlock, that's correct. Yeah, it would be the rock mulch.
Mr. Mayor,
Councilman Cavanagh.
we close the public hearing on item number 2.
Second.
I have a motion second to close the public hearing. Is there any discussion? If not, all in favor signify by saying aye.
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 Opposed, nay. Yes, have it. The public hearing is closed.
Council, I'll just weigh in.
Councilman Cavanagh.
Thank you. Sorry, Mr. Mayor. Sorry, I appreciate that. Council, I see this as a really simple application that I'm generally in approval of. Stephanie team, I appreciate the request. There's just not a clear path here. And you install vital infrastructure that is incredibly necessary and important for our community. That vital infrastructure isn't always the most appealing for development to occur next to. And if you said, hey, 5 years, 10 years, if you gave me a pathway so that staff could track this, I think I could get there. Without knowing what that looks like, it's just, for me, I default back to what our code is. So I'm approval of the application. I'm not in support of waiving the delay on a landscape buffer. I recognize that may require you to connect to city services and use city water to take care of that until PI comes. Just without a clear path, it always makes me a little eerie to get outside of our regular routine, and without a clear path, I just can't be supportive of that particular piece. So council, that's where I'll be tonight.
Mr. Mayor,
Councilman Overton.
I'll be quick. I support a lot of what Council President Cavanagh said. Want to stay consistent with how we've done it in the past. And I have to remember, they're one of the first ones out to this area, but they also want to be good neighbors to the residential that's going to grow up around them. And having that mature landscaping as it goes is a pretty important part, I think, of being that good neighbor to the residential going around them. I am supportive of this application. I'm not in support of deferring the landscaping.
Mr. Mayor?
Councilman Taylor.
I'm in line with what was said, and I don't like to impose additional costs if we can avoid them, certainly on businesses who are investing millions of dollars to provide a critical infrastructure. So I appreciate the ask, and I think it was warranted, but I'm okay with the extending the conditional use permit timeframe from 2 years to 5 years. I think that seems reasonable to allow you the flexibility to do the business that you need to do, but I think having installed sprinkler systems and before, I just don't quite think that the cost is so significant that we would kind of want to jeopardize what we would want to see here without any sort of surety. So yeah, I think it's a good application. I'll support it, but not the deferral of the landscaping. Mr. Mayor?
Councilman Taylor.
Unless there's any additional comments, I'd be prepared to make a motion that we approve, after considering all staff, applicant, and public testimony, and move that we approve file number H2025-0008 as presented in the staff report for the hearing date of July 22nd, 2025, with the addition of extending the time frame of the conditional use permit from 2 years to 5 years.
Second.
I have a motion and a second. Is there discussion on the motion?
Yes, Mr. Mayor,
Councilman.
this motion includes that they'll hook up to the city water.
Yes, Mr. Mayor, thank you. I think correct to hook up to the city water for the irrigation services. Thank you for clarifying.
Second concurs.
Okay. Any further discussion? If not, clerk call the roll.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Cavanagh.
Aye.
Little Roberts. Taylor.
Aye.
Overton.
Aye.
Whitlock.
Aye.
All ayes, motion carried, and the item is agreed to. Have a good evening, everybody. Next, we'll move on to item 3, which is public hearing for Mogul Industrial Park Subdivision, H 2025-0006. We will open this public hearing with staff comments. Nick, nice to see you.
Good to see you too, Mr. Mayor. Good evening, Mr. Mayor and members of the council. The next item on the agenda is the preliminary plat for Mogul subdivision. The applicant is proposing a preliminary plat consisting of 11 building lots across 88.2 acres within the IL zoning district. The plat excludes the parcels containing the St. Luke's Building, Building J, and Building M. Development is proposed to occur in 3 phases. The site is generally located at the northwest corner of Black Cat and I-84. And as shown on the screen, the existing zoning is IL and the flume designations are mixed employment and low density employment. This property was annexed in 2021, at which time the development agreement and a development agreement was established, including specific requirements for road improvements, limited uses, timing thresholds for extending a collector road through the site. It's important to note that subdividing the property is not a requirement under the current DA. The applicant is choosing to do so primarily for project phasing of additional buildings. This is the existing conditions out there, or the preliminary plat. This would be the St. Luke's building, Building M, and all of these buildings on the frontage are actually currently under construction, or this is Building J. Building M will be here, and these buildings are under construction currently, which will be included in the plat with this back section. Might give you a little clearer image right there. Although the configuration of the parcels may not appear connected, the applicant has legally constructed boundaries through a series of adjustments. According to the Ada County surveyors, as long as the parcels are connected via right-of-way and the plat is signed by ACHD, the entire area can be treated as a single preliminary plat. So it will be these 6 parcels back here and the parcels fronting on Black Cat right here, but these 3 parcels right here will not be included in the formal subdivision. The surrounding parcels, while not a part of the plat, are also part of the broader development and are governed by the CCNRs, ensuring shared responsibilities for landscaping, roadways, and cross-access. The 10-mile interchange specific area plan requires the collector roadway to be built within the part of the development. The east-to-west collector, known as Grand Mogul, has already been partially constructed and partially deeded to ACHD for the constructed portion. North-south collector roadway is also a requirement, and this will give you a better idea. This will be the north-south collector on the very west boundary. Part of the north-south collector will be proposed on Lot 3, Block 2, which will include a turnaround approved by ACHD. However, as the city anticipates future development in this area, there is a concern about whether the connection at Franklin Road will align property on the north and the south side. Staff has presented an alternative along the east side of the Rosenloft Drain for logical city service expansion, but acknowledges the applicant's valid concerns about the cost and feasibility for smaller developments on that side. So as a result of that, staff has worked with the applicant since the commission hearing to revise the condition to allow for future collaboration on the roadway alignment prior to the final plat of phase 3 for this development. So the city, the applicant, and ACHD can figure out what is the best alignment for that road at the time that the final plat for phase 3 comes in, which is anticipated to be, I think, several years down the line. And regarding access, the entire development, regarding cross-access, the entire development is covered by CCNRs, which will include a provision for cross-access among parcels. As a result, staff is comfortable allowing a reference to the CCNRs in the plat notes. Staff and commission have recommended a few modifications to the conditions of approval, and I have displayed them on the screen for you guys' reference. So we'll want condition 5D to be striked because it's repetitive. Primarily modification to 4D to allow for the plat note to either have a blanket cross-access easement or for it to reference the CCNRs. And then a modification to condition 3 to allow for, with the final plat phase 3, to allow for coordination for that alignment of the north-south collector on the south and north side of Franklin Road. And I'd like to note that no public comments were received for this application, and staff is recommending approval with conditions, and I'll stand for any questions you may have.
Thank you. Council, any questions for staff? Okay, would the applicant like to come forward? Good evening. Say your name and address for the record.
I might be too tall. Mr. Mayor, members of council, thank you. My name is Jason Densmer. I'm with the Land Group. I'm here. My address is 462 East Shore Drive in Eagle, and I'm pleased to be here tonight representing the applicant for the Mogul Industrial Park subdivision. We appreciate Nick and your staff's work on this application over the past several months as we brought it forward with them. Generally, tonight we're in full support of the staff report as written. I did want to give you just a quick update on the project because it has been in front of you before since it was originally annexed into the city and entered into a development agreement. Things have been going really well with the project. The Meridian Commerce Park has constructed the St. Luke's building, recently completed Building J, and 4 additional smaller format light industrial buildings along the Black Cat frontage. We've also improved the Black Cat frontage according to ACHD's conditions of approval for the project and constructed about the first third of Grand Mogul, the east-west collector road. Your approval, hopefully tonight, of the Mogul Industrial Park subdivision will allow us to continue moving forward in a kind of a methodical, logical development of the overall project, still consistent with the development agreement and adhering to all of the conditions that we know we have to do. The Planning and Zoning Commission, we were pleased to have their recommendation for approval. And really the only things that we needed to talk about with them were this north-south collector road that Nick mentioned will occur with our phase 3 of the development on the western boundary of the project. There's just a lot of kind of haziness in the crystal ball for that area of the project, and the exact alignment of that roadway we think is best deferred a few years into the future until there's a little bit more clarity about development of the property to the west of us and where the intersection of that road will need to align on Franklin Road. So we're in support of the revised condition of approval that was recommended to you by the Planning and Zoning Commission and the 2 other minor modifications to conditions that Nick mentioned earlier. So a lot of words just went by. Hopefully you follow them, but if you have any questions, I'm happy to answer them. The short story is we're very happy with the recommendations of staff and your Planning and Zoning Commission, and hope to gain your approval tonight for the preliminary plat.
Thank you. Council, any questions for the applicant? Okay. Thank you very much. Madam Clerk, anyone signed to provide testimony on this item?
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. No one has signed up.
Okay, is there anybody who's present who would like to provide testimony on this item? Or online? Seeing no one coming forward, does the applicant like to make any final comments? Council, I'll turn this over to you.
Mayor,
Councilman Cavanagh.
move that we close the public hearing on item H-2025-0006.
Have a motion and a second to close the public hearing. Is there any discussion? If not, all in favor, signify by saying aye.
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 Opposed, nay. Ayes have it, the public hearing is closed.
Mr. Mayor,
Councilman Cavanagh.
pretty straightforward application, just with it being a preliminary plat. I want to note for council, I know we spent a lot of time last week talking about the service impact tool. This didn't exist in 2021. When this came in, it is there today. I did hear from fire and planning today. Again, similar set of circumstances. It's kind of away from town. Current conditions with access will likely be resolved as development occurs. So I don't see any compelling reason why we would want to delay at least getting the preliminary plat approved. So, Mr. Mayor, I'm going to move that we approve item 3, preliminary plat for H-2025-006, as presented the staff report, notating the changes as presented by staff, include all staff and applicant testimony.
Second.
Have a motion and a second to approve item 3. Is there discussion on the motion? If not, clerk call the roll.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Cavanagh.
Aye.
Little Roberts.
Aye.
Taylor.
Aye.
Overton.
Aye.
Whitlock.
Aye.
All ayes, motion carried, the item is agreed to. Have a good evening. Okay, next up is item 4, which is a public hearing for area of city impact comprehensive plan map amendment, which is H 2025-0029. We will open this public hearing with staff comments. Evening, Carl.
Good evening, Mr. Mayor, members of the council. My name is Carl Anderson, long-range associate planner here with the city. Tonight's presentation, we're going to go over the city's request to amend the city's future land use map, comprehensive future land use map, amending the boundaries of the land use map itself and the city's area of impact. I'll go through the reasoning behind the request, detail some of the areas that are being impacted and the city's next steps. So the why behind the request, in 2024, the Idaho State Legislature amended Idaho Code 676526 pertaining to areas of impact. There are a couple key components here that I'd like to detail. One of those is establishing kind of a timeline that the city needed to address modifying the boundaries of its area of city impact. So the timeline, the deadline essentially for that area to be modified is December 31st of 2025. The city has been in contact with Ada County, and we are anticipating meeting that timeline. Requires areas of city impact to be within 2 miles from city limits. Considerations for service planning were also amended within Idaho code as well. Essentially also established that areas of impact are within the jurisdiction of Ada County. So the request will be followed by a request to Ada County to reestablish the city's current or proposed area of city impact. Additionally, one point of clarification within Idaho code is that it does clarify that city may adopt a comprehensive plan, conduct infrastructure, capital improvements, and other planning activities beyond its current area of impact. So while we are pulling back some of our boundaries due to the 2-mile radius from city limits, we do anticipate that we'll continue to plan for those areas for anticipate future growth within those areas. Being a citywide application, this request was noticed for a public hearing. Courtesy notices were sent to affected property owners whose properties were subject to the request. The removed parcels impact 38 total parcels, 507 acres and some change parcel acres. So this does not include right of way. With the addition of one parcel totaling 5.06 parcel acres. This was a request supported as part of this application's where the city of Boise recently removed a parcel on Amity Road from its area of city impact. The resolution for that action is included within the staff report. The proposed properties would be included in the area of city impact for Meridian with a future land use map designation of medium density residential. There are no development proposals with that request at this time. So as that property develops in the future, the applicant would need to come forward with their request to annex and develop the property at that time. Additionally, entryway corridors would be modified accordingly with this request where areas are being removed or added. Those entryway corridors that are impacted would be either extended or removed accordingly. So the map on the left details the area that's being removed from the city's area of impact. You'll see the change in the acres. This is 512 acres and some change. That's inclusive of right-of-way from that area. This is located generally in the southwest corner of the city of Meridian's boundary, area city impact boundary and future land use map. Of note, there are parcels included in this as permitted by Idaho State Code where that buffer might bisect a parcel. If it's bisecting that parcel, it may be included within the AOCI boundaries. So those parcels are included within our proposed area of impact. The image on the right is the area to be added, 5.07 acres. That is the parcel to be added to both the flume and the city's area of impact with a designation, again, of medium density residential, matching those properties to the west of the subject parcel. The Planning and Zoning Commission recommended approval of the request on the public hearing held on June 26th, 2025, and forwarded their recommendation to City Council. The next steps following Council's decision tonight, staff will be requesting renegotiation with Ada County to reestablish the city's area of impact, pending council approval. We'll be back before you for a resolution either within the coming months or after that decision. Some of the timing related to resolution is still up in the air a little bit, but we're working through that. With that, I'm happy to answer any questions that the council may have.
Thank you. Council, any questions for staff on this item?
Mr. Mayor,
Councilwoman Little Roberts.
Mr. Mayor, Carl, will you just help me understand? When I was on the council previously, we spent a lot of time talking about clean lines. And this looks like it does just the opposite. But I know there's got to be more behind it than what I'm understanding. I'm just curious.
Yes, thank you, Mr. Mayor, Councilwoman Little Roberts. So again, this is just removing those portions from the city's current future land use map and area of impact that extend beyond that 2-mile radius. There's an exhibit in the staff report that does detail what that buffer looks like as it bisects those parcels. So those parcels are within the city's capital improvement plans and future planning efforts. So we would like to keep them within the city's area of impact and future land use map where possible. So what you're seeing here, maybe at the northmost portion of the area to be removed where the lines don't necessarily square up. That's generally following parcel boundaries.
Yeah, the intention is to eventually include this in our area of city impact. Probably in 5 years, we will maybe have annexed far enough that we would, next time we update it, we would include it. So it would still be a nice clean line eventually,
Great,
but
thank you.
yeah.
Thank you.
Okay. Madam Clerk, anyone sign up to provide testimony on this item?
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. No, no one has signed up.
Is there anybody present who would like to provide testimony on this item? Seeing no one coming forward, any last comments from staff?
No, Mr. Mayor, thank you.
Council, what's your pleasure direction?
Mr. Mayor,
Councilman Overton.
seeing no comments, I'd move we close the public hearing.
Second.
I have a motion second to close the public hearing. Is there any discussion? If not, all in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed, nay. The ayes have it. Public hearing is closed.
Mr. Mayor,
Councilman Overton.
this is pretty straightforward. It's keeping us in alignment with the new state code, and I'd be happy to move forward with a motion.
Okay.
Mr. Mayor, after approving all staff applicant public testimony, I move to approve file number H 2025-0029 to remove the subject 507.34 acres from the city's future land use map and area of city impact and include 5.06 acres as described to the area of city impact and future land use map with a designation of medium density residential and authorize staff to request apply with Ada County to reestablish the boundaries of the city's area of city impact.
Second?
I have a motion and a second. Is there discussion on the motion? If not, clerk call the roll.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Cavanagh,
Aye.
Little Roberts, Taylor,
Aye.
Overton,
Aye.
Whitlock.
Aye.
All ayes, motion carries. The item is agreed to. Thank you very much. With that, we'll move on to item 5, which is a public hearing for proposed updates to Title 4, Chapter 1, Meridian City Code per Idaho State Code, Section 50-344-2. Mr. Neri?
Thank you, Mr. Mayor, members of the council. You had this presentation in front of you last week, so for the record and for the public that may be watching, this is a desire for our code to now match up to some changes that were put into place by the last legislative session that does allow, even in areas with a franchise for solid waste collection like we have in the city of Meridian and the mandatory requirement to use our franchisee for most solid waste collections. There is an exception that's been created by the state legislature that allows that to be done by other entities other than franchisees in areas that are defined by the city. So we've done that in this particular case in creating basically an exception that allows for these to be done by anybody, including the franchise or either the current franchisee or any other entity with a limited basis for a limited period of time. We've created a way that can then be tracked and collected and adjusted through our system. Anyway, this allows for an exception that's been created by the legislature and allows us to define what that is, and that's what this does. So we haven't had any additional comments since the last presentation. And again, we have vetted that through our Solid Waste Commission as well as with our current franchisees. So we're ready to move this forward, and again, whatever your pleasure.
Thank you, council. Any questions for staff? Okay. This is a public hearing. Do we have anyone sign up to provide testimony on this item?
Mr. Mayor, no one has signed up.
Okay. Is there anybody present who would like to provide testimony on this item?
Mr. Mayor,
Councilman Cavanagh.
close the public hearing on item number 5.
Second?
Motion is second to close the public hearing. Is there any discussion? If not, all in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed, nay. The ayes have it, and the public hearing is closed. So with that, we will have it under ordinances. You want to move on to the next couple items? Okay, with that, the next item up is item 6, public hearing, proposed updates to Title I, Chapter 7, Section 8 of Meridian City Code regarding city council members' compensation. Open this public hearing with staff comments.
Yes, Mr. Mayor, members of the council. So we, again, as presentation was last week, Former Councilmember Hoagland's here as well if you have questions from the committee. This is a recommendation from your Citizens Committee to both recommend an increase to the City Council over the next 2 years. And also in that, and I appreciate the councils have taken a look at this and given us some feedback, some of the information in the transition and trying to get this on for this week. A couple of things got missed, but we have corrected it. The one that is in the packet for your approval tonight, or can be delayed if you wish, is reflective of what was presented last week, which is an increase to the council for both next calendar year in 26, as well as another increase in 27, and then a condition that after those 2 years, then the council increases would align with the city's general employee compensation increases, if any that are provided, it'd be the same amount as those would be going forward. The recommendation is not in this, but the ordinance still would be in place that allows the committee to reconvene each election cycle to evaluate those, do a market analysis, and bring back any other suggestions, if any, to you. But so that wouldn't change, but this would be a 2-year change in compensation for council members, as well as an ongoing method that's already then going to be in ordinance to allow for increases without any other additional changes.
Thank you, Bill. Council, any questions for staff?
Mr. Mayor,
Councilman Bullock.
Bill, thanks for the explanation. And if Mr. Hoagland is still there, again, thanks for the presentation last week. My microphone wasn't quite working, so I didn't get to express my full appreciation then. So I'll do it now. Just a question, Bill, in terms of the ordinance, which has dollar amounts fixed in it, and then subsection B, which 2 years from now allows for an increase commensurate with the city employee pay increase or COLA. Is there a reason why we couldn't just do subsection B at this point, or do we have to amend subsection A and change dollar figures at this point?
Well, Mr. Mayor, members of council, Councilmember Whitlock, actually, you can do whatever you wish. The recommendation from the committee was to move the total compensation for the council up to those dollar figures, and then subsequent to that, then the increases. So the desire was to move the value of compensation for each of those positions up to those numbers. And if you recall, former Councilman Perot was here last week as well. And they sort of targeting that 20,000 figure was what they were looking at, but recognized that getting to that over a 2-year period was more palatable. And so they wanted to do that. But then after that, the secondary was also then to build in that increase that was built into the system that's already in place for compensation with, again, that adjustment or evaluation every couple of years. So that was the intent of the committee. Certainly this council could do whatever you wish. So you can certainly make it just the percentage increase only, and that's it. But I mean, that's certainly your call.
Thank you.
If I misstated that, certainly Councilmember Hoagland's here as well. He can certainly correct that, but that's what I recall the discussion was.
Council, any further questions? Is there anybody from the public who'd like to provide testimony on this item? Scene 1 coming forward.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Brad Hoagland, 2470 West Trestle Drive here in Meridian. And I had the pleasure of serving on the committee, and just wanted to remind you a couple of things. First of all, it's really not about you. It's about the future and those that come after you. And that's one of the things the committee had a good discussion about. We wanted to have fair and competitive compensation going into the future. We want people who come after you to be compensated in a way that they're not going to get rich. We know you aren't doing it for the money, and people in the future, I'm pretty sure, aren't going to be doing it for the money. But there is that aspect that you're taking valuable time and time away from your family. In fact, I think I characterize as spousal appreciation pay. And that's what happens to that. Council, I'll speak to the council salaries here because we have a separate one for the mayor. But in 2023, the committee had made a recommendation that was turned down. It was not acted upon. So 2024 and 2025, there's no increases. So that's why we wanted to go to $1,500 for this coming year and a following $1,500 the next year. That way, we hope we would then have the council move forward with the recommendation of having the general, whatever the general employee population receives, that will also be what the mayor and council receive. And that way, we kind of take the politics out of this. People look at it as, oh, they're just self-serving when they get to vote for their own pay increase. That's why you have the committee. We look at it. We looked at all the amount you're receiving since 2000. We looked at other cities and did that comparison. Now, it's a little hard sometimes because you look at Nampa, the third largest city, Meridian's the second largest city, and there's a big difference. But in their code, they're required 2 meetings a month. You have 4, twice as many. So there are discrepancies like that that we kind of ferreted through and said, okay, this is why we think you should be paid this amount. So again, you're not going to get rich on it. I think I said last time it was $54 per pay period increase, and that's before taxes. So not a whole heck of a lot. But it's very important. We also had made the recommendation that if you don't want to go 1,500 per year, at least go 500. There's got to be some increase in there. We need to keep up. Otherwise, you get so far behind, the committee after us will come and have to make a recommendation that's even larger. But we hope by accepting this recommendation for the next 2 years and then beginning in 2028, that cost of living increase that employees get would also be received by council, and you just move forward that way. And then every 2 or 4 years, whatever was decided for that, we can look at it from a market perspective, just like HR does. Does there need to be a market adjustment? But everything is built in. Whatever goes to the general employee would go to you. So that's what we did. We hope you agree with that. And I'm stand for any questions.
Thank you. Council, any questions? Thank you, Brad.
Mr. Mayor,
Councilman Taylor.
maybe a question for staff. So I'm looking at the ordinance here. Are we tonight would be voting on this ordinance? Am I understanding correctly? Is this all updated with how it was portrayed to you last week with how to draft the ordinance, as in, if we accepted it, this would be the ordinance and this would be what we would do tonight?
Yes, sir.
Mr. Mayor, quick follow-up. If we'd like to make some modifications to this tonight, what would that process be? Would we just indicate that and we want to come back with maybe a slightly change to that? Because I know we took the recommendations were drafted in the ordinance as it was, and here it is before us, but we didn't have a very much of a discussion, at least about if we'd like to see any tweaks or changes to that. So the process, if I understand it, would be if we wanted to make some changes tonight, we would offer that up, we would vote on it, and then we would potentially have it redrafted to come back next week or the following week. Is that correct?
Yes, Mr. Mayor, members of council, Councilor Material, if that's exactly correct. The direction was bring forward what we proposed. If the council does want to make changes, we can then bring it back to a subsequent meeting. If the desire is to bring it back on next week because you're going to be comfortable with those changes, that's fine. But next week, we weren't intending to have another public hearing, but you certainly can. Or we can bring it back on the 12th of August for a public hearing. We do need to have some final action by, and again, I apologize, I think at least by the 12th, we'd like to get that finalized to make sure we meet the timeline as required by state code. So it can be done this week, it can be done next week, it can be done on the 12th. If you want to make changes, you can certainly do that.
Yeah, Mr. Mayor,
Councilman Taylor.
just to make sure to, I think now would probably be the appropriate time to sort of have some of the discussion, even though the public hearing's open. I appreciate the work of the committee, and there's some things in there that I really like and I want to support, and there's some things I can't support today for the reason that's pretty obvious, which is if we're considering asking for a public levy increase, I have a hard time asking for an increase, though I do support the idea of tying future decisions to a percentage increase with the employee. I think that, to me, that makes a lot of sense, and I agree. It also makes sense to keep market adjustment discussion in there as we would deem appropriate. So, I don't want to bury the lead, as it were. I wouldn't support this tonight, but what I would like to see is essentially that we adopt the second half of the the ordinance where actually starting next year, we would start tying our salary increases to the percentage increase of that. But I'm not in favor tonight of the increase in salary, just because we are in a unique situation this year. And I would make the argument, when was the last time we had a permanent public levy that we were potentially presenting to the city to vote on and approve? To me, would qualify as extraordinary circumstances by which I don't think it's appropriate. I always have considered budget documents and sort of the budget process as laying out our priorities to the citizens. And to me, it's a confusing argument to say, we're going to take an increase in pay and we're going to ask for more money from you for the levy. Again, I'm not trying to be difficult. I'm not trying to be a naysayer. I'm trying to be productive in the discussion. So I just wanted to kind of state that's where I am at this point. I could support something that was only the second half of the ordinance, but not the entirety, without some modifications.
So I know my comments are going to fall on deaf ears because no one likes to have a conversation. And just like I won't speak up when you're on the next item, but I'm going to challenge council to say, part of the conversation that I've had about the levy, as well as the SAFER grant, I said I wouldn't let it impact our current operations and our current needs. To me, these are not competing issues. The levy's been put forward, and the say, if you would like us to retain these additional firefighters, if you'd like to pay your police more, if you'd like to do prosecution ourselves, this is how we can go about doing that. But to me, and maybe you can make your own arguments about whether or not that rings true, but this is no different than any other thing that went through our budget process. We want competitive salaries for all of our employees. We did not back away from any changes to our employee compensation this year because of the levy conversation. If there was a market adjustment that was necessary, if there was a step plan that was going to be made, if there was a cost of living increase that was going to be done, we did all that, and that's all included into our budget. So I know you feel like you may feel like it's being hypocritical in the context, but I think it actually, what is hypocritical is we'll call it the council opposition oppression vote to say no to increased wages so that no one wants the job, because you don't get compensated for this to the level that's necessary. But I know it's a tough conversation. It's a tough vote no matter. It's a tough conversation. But at least I want to be the one to say some things that I think, you can take it, you can not, you can vote however you want. But my viewpoint on the levy has been we would not impact our current operational components, and this is the recommendation. And I'm not going to say because they got together and gave their time to give their recommendations that you should have to do it. But if you're not going to do it, I would say let's get rid of this code. Let's no longer go to a committee that's going to evaluate and make recommendations if it's really something that's not going to be what's going to make that driving factor. Or take it out of your hands, let other people make that decision throughout. Let me make the decision for you. I'm serious. It's like there's other ways to do this because it's never comfortable to have this conversation about your own salaries. I get it 100%. And it's not easy in that context. So I'm going to stop right there. And
Mr. Mayor?
Councilman Taylor.
It didn't fall on deaf ears. It was well received. I just cordially disagree.
Correct.
Mr. Mayor.
Councilwoman Little Roberts.
Mr. Mayor and Council, this is definitely something I go back and forth on because as Brad pointed out, we're the ones making the decision. And so the first thing we do is take, how do we feel about it in consideration? And it's tough for me to say, raise my salary for whatever reason, because I'm here because I love the city. But I also know that I've talked to so many people that possibly could be up here someday and they think, well, that's kind of not in my wheelhouse because it really isn't paid, especially if they're younger in their 30s or 40s, are like, that doesn't match what I'm even remotely considering as a part-time salary, because we do end up working more hours than we anticipate. And so there, to me, there's a lot of things to look at, and I don't think we could have had a better committee. I mean, our committee was made up of people that have sat in these chairs and wrestled with the decision, two of our esteemed former colleagues, as well as people that are very versed on what we do, how we do it, how much time goes in it. And then my HR side of me says, we kind of missed out on not keeping up with salaries every single year. So, so I think in the long run, I am supportive of this. It's got so many angles, and I don't believe that it's tied in with the levy. I think we've got to consider everything, but I think that your words definitely rang true for me, that those are two completely different issues. So, thank you.
Mr. Mayor,
Councilman Overton.
say a lot of words I think I said last time we talked about this. We voted on this a couple of years ago. I was brand new on council, and at the time, I was like very, very uncomfortable voting on my own pay increase. And I was brand new to council, and I was still discovering just how much time it took from my week, not just to do this job, but to do it right, to put the homework in, to spend the time looking through everything. So after voting no 2 years ago and getting to this point now, I realize what we're doing is we're digging a hole. And we can keep digging that hole. We're not doing ourselves a favor. We're not doing future councils a favor. But I think I have to go back to the bottom line that was said is we're not doing this for us. This isn't in front of us for us. This is in front of us for city councils now, future, everyone to look at so they're adequately compensated for the work they do to do the job. And it's a tough one. I don't like voting on something for myself. I made that quite apparent 2 years ago. I kind of get it now, and it helps that there were former council members on that committee that can look you in the eye and sit there, and they're not getting compensated for it now, and they're looking right at me saying, you need to do this, and this is why. And they spent their time up here sitting on this dais, making decisions for the city and doing the work. And based on those conversations, I think it's the right thing to do to support it. And I would move forward. I think we can always find an excuse for not supporting this. We can always find it. But I'll support it this year going forward.
And maybe just piggyback off one thing that you said. You know, I often say this to other people about, said the reason Meridian is successful and what we have in the Public Safety Training Center and our amazing parks and our fire things is because council at one point in time had made a very tough decision to implement impact fees. Quite frankly, this council, the job that you have to do is made so much easier because some council 20 years ago made some very tough decisions to put additional costs on the back of growth and development that allows this council to be successful, myself included. This is maybe one of those times where you're especially setting stuff up, catching up, and a path moving forward for the long run for those next councils as well at this point in time. But I just think sometimes these are things that doesn't feel right, doesn't feel comfortable, but I think it's important to consider. So.
Mr. Mayor.
Councilman Whitlock.
I started the evening on the fence on this issue, and unfortunately it was a picket fence. And so I'm going to have to figure out which side I want to fall on. And part of me wants to fall where Councilman Taylor is, because I agree with that. And this is not in conflict with what we may or may not decide next week, but it is juxtaposed to what we may or may not decide next week with the public safety levy. So I have to look at the full picture of that. And yet the other side of the fence, I totally agree with what you just said. We need to make some decisions about the future. And frankly, if the public safety levy fails, somebody's going to be making some really hard decisions on this council, and they ought to be compensated for making those tough decisions. if the public safety levy passes, then we're able to make that a priority for our city as we move forward and deliver on what the citizens say that they want. So again, I'm trying to figure out which side of the fence I'm going to fall onto, because this picket fence is not a comfortable ride right now. I'd like to hear the rest of the discussion, but I appreciate the council from you, Mayor. I appreciate the concerns from Councilman Taylor. I agree with both sides of that. So if anybody else can help me get off the fence, I'd appreciate it.
Your cleanup hitters coming in. Councilman Cavanagh.
Mr. Mayor, I don't know if this helps Councilmember Whitlock one way or another. I think this is the 5th time that I've been a part of one of these. And I'll be honest, my very first got on council, I was a no unless proven otherwise. Just, I showed up, my mind was made, I was not going to vote to support a salary increase. And in time, quite frankly, I think because of these committees, I have tried to be much more open-minded. I've even voted to support a salary increase, I believe, once in my time. So I'm not always opposed, and Mayor, and Mr. Neri, I want to commend you. I think this is the best committee we've ever put together since I've been on council. And like my good colleague, Councilmember Whitlock, I have swayed back and forth. And Councilmember Little Roberts, you hit the nail on the head. I don't think that a salary increase for the council is tied to a levy, but I also don't think that we can make those decisions in a vacuum. I think we have to look at the real world implications. And former Councilmember Hoagland, I think, put it best. It's not about us. It is about, got to take our person out of it. And Councilmember Little Roberts, you talk a lot about, positions, not people. And that has sat in the back of my head a lot. It's not about Councilmember Cav or Councilmember Taylor. It's about future council members who will sit in these seats. And so I have wrestled with that. The part that I've landed for me is, and you've heard me ask about this at various budgets, and as we've talked about compensation for our employees, I want our employees to be paid a fair and equitable wage. I don't want to compare it necessarily to this city or that city. We want to be selective. I want to make sure that our employees receive a fair and equitable wage. Likewise, I want to make sure that our city council receives a fair and equitable compensation. Our mayor receives a fair and equitable compensation. Knowing that I've never met anybody that's ran or sit up here that said, because we increased our wage $1,500, that was the ticket to get me to run. Or because you didn't take an increase, I decided I wasn't going to run. I don't think that our voters want candidates that are focused on compensation. I do agree with Councilmember Hoagland. My wife has had a few makeup dinners purchased, probably with my city council salary and flowers, for saying, hey, I told you to be home at 8 and they get home till 11:30. That happens. But are we paid a fair and equitable wage for what we do? And I think the answer is yes. And so I likely won't be in support of an increase this year, not because I don't think the committee makes sense, and not because I don't think it's deserved. Quite frankly, all of you that are up here deserve to be paid 100 times more than what you're paying because you care about this community and the time that you put in. It's not about that. Are we receiving a fair and equitable amount of compensation for the job that our community asks of us? I think right now the answer is yes.
So the public hearing is still open.
Mr. Mayor, where I don't see anybody here, and I have to say I'm going to convey a little bit of disappointment. Our state legislature took up compensation increases. There was lots of chatter and lots of people had strong opinions. When one of our neighbor cities took up compensation increases, it was a packed, council chambers. We don't have anybody here, despite I think this being promoted very, very well. We used to have a council member who sit right over here and says, if nobody's here, that must mean everybody's in agreement. I don't necessarily share that same opinion, but I'm disappointed that there's nobody here in our community outside of a good committee member to provide any testimony on this one way or another. But that said, Mr. Mayor, I'm happy to make a motion that we close the public hearing, propose updates to Title I, Chapter 7, Section 9, the Meridian City Code regarding city council compensation.
Second.
Have a motion and a second to close the public hearing. Is there any discussion? If not, all in favor, signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed, nay.
Aye.
Oh, sorry. The ayes have it, and the public hearing is closed. So, council, I don't know if you want to continue discussion before we get to the ordinance to know whether or not we're going to take up the ordinance or not. Any further, or just go toward the ordinance when we get there and see what happens? Okay, all right, that's what we'll do. So with that, we'll go to item 7, which is public hearing, proposed updates to Title 1, Chapter 6, Section 5 of Meridian City Code regarding mayor's compensation. Turn this over to Mr. Neri.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor, members of the council. Again, as the prior one, our Citizens Committee did meet and made these recommendations for these increases for the mayor's compensation. Basically, very similar conversation, very similar discussion. Again, it was looking at trying to be consistent, trying to move the wages up periodically as necessary. That's a very common compensation method, is to do that, to avoid these discussions where you have to make drastic increases. There was a desire by the committee to move this number up to what they felt was a more reasonable and equitable approach for compensation for the mayor. Again, the committee is currently configured that it meets every couple of years during an election cycle. So the next time it's scheduled to meet again is in 2 years before the actual term of the mayor is over, before the next mayor term would begin. But this is trying to, again, keep it up and move it along. Again, there have been, and they looked at a number of past ones. Over the last 25 years, the mayor has increased more incrementally more often than the council. There have been occasions where they have not. But here, again, was the same idea of not looking at the individuals, not looking at the individual person in the job, but the job itself and what the expectation the committee felt as a community, as the committee members, as their expectation of what they believe, as well as what they think the public is looking for and what they think is fair compensation. So that was where those numbers came from. That's what the intent was to move that along. And then also same thing, to put this in future opportunity for those to increase on a regular basis annually, along with that periodic market adjustment with the election cycle. So that was the intent for this one as well.
Thank you, Mr. Neri. Council, any questions for staff? Would the public like to come and provide any testimony on this, or committee member?
Yes, I would, Mr. Mayor. Brad Hoagland, 2470 West Trestle Drive, Meridian. And that's one thing about the committee, all residents, and they want to be good stewards of tax dollars. I mean, that's really what we want. And when it came to the mayor's salary, the recommendation was $3,500 increase for 2026 and $3,500 for 2027. And again, also then tying into, for starting in 2028, the general employee increases as well. One of the things about the salary now for the mayor, he is not paid what a CEO of an organization this size with a budget of this magnitude would be paid. They are much higher. And of course, bonuses and other things. You're in government work, you don't get bonuses. That's just the way it works. That's fine. And again, it's not about this mayor, it's about that position and the future of that position. I do know, having been in private business and private entity, that the level that's currently at, it's not even at a vice president level. It's not even at a director level. There are people who are directors in organizations that make far more than this. So we thought it was imperative that we increase that a bit, and still not even going to make 150,000. It'd be after 2027, it'd be at 146, 387. So with the direct reports that he has, the budget he manages, the day-to-day affairs, we thought it's the best we can do at this time. But then if we tie it in moving forward, that would be helpful for whoever's in that position in the future. So any questions, happy to answer.
Thank you. Council, any questions? Okay. Is there anybody else who's been hanging out all night that wants to come forward and talk about this item?
Mr. Mayor.
Councilman Taylor.
If there's anything, I try to be consistent. So I don't need to repeat what I said before because my position is consistent. But that said, I will take the opportunity, as I've learned about over the last year and a half of being on council, the responsibilities that the mayor's seat has. It's significant. It is a large organization. It does require a lot of time. And I absolutely agree with you, the notion that we want competent people to be interested in this role, not just now, but in the future as the city grows. There's a lot of challenges. You do have to face a lot of difficult decisions, some of us thrusting it upon you, some of your own making, but it is a
Oh,
challenging
come on,
job.
my own making? What's up with that?
And I recognize that.
I'm
So
kidding.
I will compliment you. I think that the city's being run well, and my position on this issue isn't reflective of your job performances as much as being consistent with what I've said before about how we present these things to our constituency.
You could have just closed the public hearing too. Sorry. I'm having a good night tonight. I don't know why. Well, a lot of iced tea today. Any further comments or motion to close the public hearing?
Mr. Mayor,
Councilman Cavanagh.
move we close the public hearing on proposed updates to Title I, Chapter 7, Section 5 of the Meridian City Code regarding mayor's compensation.
Second.
I have a motion and a second to close the public hearing. Is there any discussion? If not, all in favor, signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed, nay. The ayes have it. The public hearing is closed. Okay. With that, we'll move on to item 8, which is ordinance number 25-2092. Ask the clerk to read this ordinance by title.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Ordinance number 25-2092 updates to Title IV, Chapter 1, Meridian City Code per Idaho Section 50-3442, amending Meridian City Code Section 4-1-3 to add definitions to household waste and temporary project, amending Meridian City Code Section 4-1-4 regarding compulsory use of solid waste collection franchisee services, amending Meridian City Code Section 4-1-8 regarding collection of solid waste and recyclable materials, specifically temporary project service and on-call service, amending City Code Section 4-1-10G, adding an exception to compulsory use of franchisee for temporary project solid waste collection, repealing conflicting ordinances and providing an effective date.
Thank you. Council, you've heard this ordinance read by title. Is there anybody that would like it read in its entirety? If not, do I have a motion?
Mr. Mayor,
Councilman Taylor.
move that we approve ordinance number 25-2092.
Second.
I have a motion and a second to approve ordinance number 25-2092. Is there discussion? If not, clerk call the roll.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Cavanagh.
Aye.
Little Roberts.
Aye.
Taylor.
Aye.
Overton.
Aye.
Whitlock.
Aye.
All ayes, motion carries, and the item is agreed to. Next item up is ordinance number 25-2093. Ask the clerk to read this ordinance by title.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. An ordinance amending Title I, Chapter 7, Section 9 of the Meridian City Code regarding city council members' compensation, providing a saving clause and providing an effective date.
Thank you. Council, you've heard this ordinance read by title. Is there anybody who would like it read in its entirety? If not, do I have a motion?
Mr. Mayor.
Councilman Overton.
Mr. Mayor, I move that we approve ordinance number 25-2093.
Second.
I have a motion, a second to approve ordinance number 25-2093. Is there discussion on the motion? If not, clerk call the roll.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Cavanagh.
No.
Little Roberts.
Aye.
Taylor.
No.
Overton.
Aye.
Whitlock.
No.
3 noes, 2 ayes, the motion fails. With that, we'll move on to ordinance number 25-2094. Is there discussion? Or I'll ask the clerk to read this ordinance by title.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. An ordinance amending Title I, Chapter 6, Section 5 of the Meridian City Code regarding mayor's compensation, providing a savings clause and providing an effective date.
Thank you. Council, you've heard this ordinance read by title. Is there anybody that would like it read in its entirety? If not, do I have a motion?
Mr. Mayor,
Councilman Overton,
move that we approve ordinance number 25-2094.
Second.
have a motion and a second to approve ordinance number 25-2094. Is there discussion on the motion? If not, clerk call the roll.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Cavanagh,
No.
Little Roberts.
Aye.
Taylor,
No.
Overton,
Aye.
Whitlock.
Aye.
3 ayes, 2 nays, and the motion is agreed to. Council, anything under future meeting topics?
Mr. Mayor,
Councilman Cavanagh.
just a good reminder to our team, special meeting next Tuesday. Make sure it's on your calendar. We'll be talking all things public safety levies. So look forward to seeing you all next week.
Okay. All right, with that, is there a motion?
Mr. Mayor,
Councilman Cavanagh.
move we adjourn the meeting.
Second.
Motion second to adjourn the meeting. All in favor, signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed, nay. The ayes have it. We are adjourned.